Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 113 of ThROH The Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning. My name is Trevor Dame, joined as always by the co-host Matt Feuerstein. And Matt, today we have a first-time guest, and I always try and compile all the plugs for all those projects that this person's been involved with whenever we have a guest on. And man, you can go on forever because obviously this person, the first thing you think about our guest today is the Death Valley Driver video review, which, with the untimely passing of Dean Rasmussen a few episodes ago, we talked about how important that place was to the wrestling scene. And then they went on to have another very entertaining blog, Segunda Caída, which is still, I believe, going. Then they went on to write for The Ringer, which is the big Mamma Jamma wrestling, not wrestling site, but sports site. And then on top of that, if you wanted this guest, you thought, I like their websites, but what if I want them in a book or a podcast form? Well, the person went and he wrote a dang book, Way of the Blade, book all about wrestling's great bloody matches. And then he did a whole companion podcast that ran for quite a while where he had guests on to talk about bloody matches. If you want to talk about a guest spread on a podcast, might be the only wrestling podcast that can count among its guests both Tony Khan, Julius Smokes, and the Necro Butcher, and Dustin Rhodes. So this is definitely a step down for him, but we thank him for slumming it with us. Phil Schneider, thank you for being on the show today.
I appreciate it, guys. I'm a ROH dude, so I thought it would be fun to come on and talk about this promotion. I wanted to try to find a show I had been to because I'd been to a fair number of them, and honestly, I can't remember if I've been to this show because this is what happens when you get old. Because it feels like it was like Edison. I went to a bunch of the Edison shows. It feels like I'd want to go to this show, so why wouldn't I be there? But rewatching it, I did not remember whether I was there or not. I still might have been. I didn't see myself in the audience. But I'm excited to talk about this with you guys. This is fun to revisit this era.
Yeah, it's a fun contrast on this show because Matt and a lot of our guests are like Northeast people, so they'll be like, yeah, I've seen, Matt was to a million ROH shows of this era where I'm Northwest Canadian, so like I have never been to an ROH show, and I'll remember like minute details from like the indie wrestling show I attended when I was 14 where anyone like you that's had it so good, it's like you just randomly forget shows that would have been like lifetime memories for me. You feast and famine on this podcast, but
I actually did see myself in the crowd on this show, which is always extremely embarrassing.
Do you remember running across me at the show? Was I at the show, Matt? You remember saying, I remember chatting with Phil. I don't think we've met, but we might have met.
No.
A bunch of times.
No, but I will say this. Yeah, I don't think we met, but there was a time, this may be embarrassing to admit, that I remember it was a show at the same venue in Edison in 2007, and I remember like standing in the back area, and I was positive that like you and Rob Naylor were both standing there as part of the same crew. Like I heard your voices and I had heard you on podcasts before. And I'm like, pretty sure that's Phil Schneider and Rob Naylor, but I was too shy to say anything.
I certainly would hang out with Rob if we were at the same shows. Like, that guy, Rob's a buddy of mine. And if we were at the same show, I would find Rob and we'd bullshit. So it is certainly possible we were at a show 2007. Again, I clearly, as we've established, don't have a great memory for which shows I went to.
Yeah.
I think I have to watch this again. I wasn't at this show. Yeah, but I definitely was at least Danielson and Joe, they wrestled during Joe's reign, right?
Yeah, they wrestled in Philly during Joe's reign in I'd say a much more celebrated match than the one that was on this show.
I can tell you, Phil, that I think you're probably not at the show because I have a quote later on in the show from you reviewing the main event in a Death Valley Driver video review, and you were saying this is the first Ring of Honor of the Bryan Danielson heel run that I've seen. So it sounded definitely like you didn't review the whole show. It sounded like you were watching this on a DVD.
On a DVD, great. You say.
Wonderful. I'm excited to hear what I thought of the show when I watched it around the same time it happened. That's good to know. I love doing that. I think our run was maybe a year or two before. I would go to a lot of the 2004, 2005 era ROH shows, and maybe at this point, not as many. Although I'm not sure what in my life would at in 2006 would have stopped me from going to it. But like I said, I've had a lot of head trauma, guys. I played football and rugby, and then I boxed for a while. I just beat the shit out of my brain, and so I think as I'm getting older now, I start to realize that while my memory for facts is really good, actual experiences in my life not great, which bugs my wife. Because also say, did we do that? She's like, yes, we were at this thing. We talked to these people. You met this person 5 or 6 times before. And I'm like, okay, sounds good.
Well, you have a good excuse. I'm just an idiot, so I can't remember certain things.
I put my keys in the fridge yesterday, so I don't know what my excuse. I've never competed in any strenuous activity that would involve repeated concussive blows to the head. But
at least you can lose the keys while they were currently in your hand, which is what tends to be what happens to me. But as a segue, Trevor, because based on all that memory stuff, as promised on the last episode, I did turn 40 between the last episode and this episode, so my memory is going to get all that much worse. But I will say this, Trevor, and I showed this to you. My friends, as a surprise 40th birthday gift, got me a cameo from Bret Hart. And before I saw this video, if I had known they were going to do that, I would have said, please don't do that. That's really embarrassing. That's so cheesy. But then I have to admit, I really, really, really loved it. It was great. Bret Hart does a good job at cameos. Although he did forget to mention 4 of the guys that chipped in, just mentioned the one that filled out the form or something. But a very, very fun experience. Also, probably kind of an embarrassing thing to get as a 40-year-old, because you think cameos are probably for, fun for young people. Oh, my favorite celebrity. But you know what? I'm extremely immature, so it worked for me.
I was working on a ringer piece that is still sitting on an editor's desk at some point. I may never run, but about champagne, and I had Champagne record a greeting to Dean. When he was in the hospital, about sort of a cameo, but they didn't pay for it. But he was he did the entire famous Champagne riff, and then did kind of a get well soon friend kind of thing. A little bittersweet memory, but I was like, oh man, I bet he would get a kick out of Champagne doing the whole drove through hell in gasoline drawers in a fur coat stick for him.
That's awesome,
Matt. The other couple things I want to mention quickly on that. And then we'll get to the show. Just a couple of funny notes. First off, we mentioned this. We were talking this privately, but when you showed me that Bret Hart cameo, I thought it was kind of funny. It was very touching. Bret's trying to riff, and he's knowing it's a request for a 40th birthday. Congratulations. He's 40 is when everything came together for me. I had my best matches after I turned 40, and I was telling you, Matt, that's really nice. But when you think about what happened to Bret Hart in his 40s,
I wasn't going to say it, but yeah, this was. If you actually look back, Bret Hart, look back. I'm not going to say it, but look at the year Bret Hart turned 40. That's all I'll say. I don't want to rub anything in, but
yeah, there's some negative portents if you want to extrapolate the Bret Hart story to your own approaching middle age. But and the other thing was I don't check Cameo very often, but you checking that, looking at. Sending me that link to the cameo sent me down a cameo rabbit hole, and I became obsessed with I didn't realize Cameo not just gives you the average star review from customers, but it tells you the average length of this person's cameos. And so Bret Hart was 90 seconds, and a lot of people, and so I got obsessed with seeing how short someone's average cameo was, and it was I could find a 23-second. I think it's Brian Cox. If you look up his cameo, he does an average, I don't know, a 30-second cameo, and and he charges more than almost anyone, and he looks absolutely miserable doing it. It's great viewing. But then on the other end of the spectrum, I saw Mick Foley. His average length is 3.5 minutes or something crazy. And I watched one of his cameos. He was playing music. He brought out costumes to wear. He was doing post-production. I was Mick Foley is a super worker in the realm of cameos. But
I can't believe that Brian Cox currently is on Cameo, as a big of a star that he is. That's amazing. 30 seconds, 30 seconds, crabby. It's still probably worth it.
I mean, the SAG-AFTRA's on strike, right? I mean,
oh yes. Now they are as of yesterday.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying. It's got I'm sure you're going to have a lot more people on Cameo. How many people do we think were on Cameo? How many cameos are available for people that were on this show? What do you think?
Oh, man.
Ooh.
Well, Bryan Danielson's not. I could say that because I've looked. But man, you know who'd be Homicide would be a great cameo. Do we think Homicide's on Cameo? Should I look it up?
Julius Smoke would be a tremendous cameo.
Oh yeah, you'd love him just to read the phone book like with his inflections and his. Yeah, that would be a great.
I mean, when I had him on Way of the Blade, it was the most disorganized of all of those podcasts for sure. But I had a real, like I didn't, but I definitely got a real kick out of just like shooting the shit with him for 45 minutes, even if it didn't really. I don't know how much we really talked about the match. I'm not really sure how much we were able to get out of him informationally, but it was definitely he's a guy that I don't understand why is not currently in ROH. When they brought back Prince Nana, which is awesome. Also, it feels like a useful guy to, that Tony Khan should call up and throw on these tapings, right?
Yeah. Like he's one of those people that you just like, there is no one that can replicate what he does. I mean, there's no one out there. So, but I guess we should get to the show. That brings us to the show we're covering today. Fight of the Century took place August 5th, 2006 at the Inman Sports Complex in Edison, New Jersey, in front of a report crowd of 800 fans. That would have been like a 150 fan increase over the last show they ran there, Ring of Homicide. We open with the incredibly rare for Ring of Honor outdoor overview headshot, where presumably they did it from the roof of the building. So very rare that Ring of Honor does anything remotely ambitious with like these kinds of things. So even that's how starved we are. It's like, oh, that's different. It's just a shot of the line outside the building to get into the crowd tonight.
Yeah, and it's not like it's some like unusual or impressive line either. It's just there's always a little line before the doors open, and you saw maybe like 25 people on this line. Like it didn't. I don't understand what they thought they were proving with that, and I think it was kind of funny. But you're right. It is so rare for them to even stand on a roof to make a shot that it was still novel. It made the show feel marginally special.
Yeah, and they got the on-screen caption that tells us they are lined up to witness the fight of the century. So they were really – this wasn't one of those Ring of Honor shows where they named the show like afterwards and they asked like the fans or Shane Hager and like, could you come up with a name for this? This was – like they had been hyping this for a few shows, I think, of like, like the fight of the century's been signed. And so, yeah, they were really hyping this big. We then go to Samoa Joe backstage. Joe says there's no more words, sneak attacks, backstabbing, and trickery. Tonight it's just him and Bryan Danielson. Joe puts over Bryan as a great wrestler, but says when it comes to who people look to as the defining champion ROH, they always look to him. They look to Joe. Joe says after tonight, Bryan will be 15 pounds lighter and looking at the new Ring of Honor champion. And then we go to Bryan Danielson backstage in a separate promo where he is wearing a shirt that says all natural on it. I always love Bryan Danielson's choice of shirts. Bryan says he has no doubt that Joe is in the best shape of his life, but Bryan says he's also in the best shape of his life. He says, I can do 1,000 squats in my sleep. I can hold a bridge for over 20 minutes. Just tonight I'm going to prove to everyone I'm the best wrestler in the world. So just two very short little promos to hype up the main event.
The most noteworthy thing to me is of that promo was just for how many years Bryan Danielson has just loved his neck bridges, like to the point where even now he'll like post pictures of him or Wheeler Yuta neck bridging on top of a mountain or something. Just he's been bragging about those bridges for now getting close to 20 years.
Yeah.
So I interviewed Bryan Danielson for GQ recently. I don't know if it's going to run. The thing about being a quasi-professional writer right now is you write so many things. It's like, well, this might run, this might never run. But he taught it was for the real life diet thing that they do for GQ. So it was all about like his workout and his diet. And apparently he wakes up at like 5 a.m. to work out. And, like,
that's not surprising, but yeah.
But he described to me that he feels like he was born to power squat was one of the quotes of the thing. That he was the best at was that. So he's still a lunatic, complete lunatic was the gist I got from chatting with him about his workout and diet routine.
Well, whether that interview ever runs, as far as Danielson shirts, we definitely need a Born to Power Squat t-shirt. Branded with Bryan Danielson.
He always seems like one of those guys that just like he will discover he likes something, and then he goes insane. Because I think you really started to see like the Bryan Danielson weightlifting content when he started, like the prospective brother-in-law phase with John Cena, where he's like, oh, turns out I really like lifting, and you just saw him like get really into stuff like that. But that brings us to the opening match. Colt Cabana defeats Sal Rinauro, scored to the ring by Jimmy Rave and Prince Nana via submission in 7 minutes, 33 seconds when he made him tap out to the Billy Goat's curse. Matt, we're continuing this run of Sal Rinauro being like a complete jobber after being a tag team champion. What'd you think about this as an opener?
Yeah, and I appreciate...
Sal Rinauro was the tag team champion?
Sal Rinauro and Tony Amalu.
Sal Rinauro in ROH at all. Like, when I saw him, I was like, oh shit, I didn't realize Sal Rinauro ever worked tag team. I remember for Wildside. He was a tag champion?
For the last 3 months of 2005, he was the tag team champion with Tony Mamaluke.
So yeah, like...
months? Wow.
Yeah, he won it on the same show as Joe versus Kobashi for that reference. So that might be why that was forgotten, since there were some other things on that show that took everyone's attention.
Yeah, so to give a little background, Phil, they brought Sal back when he hadn't been around, and neither had Mamaluke. And they just threw them together as like random team that wins the tag team titles in a massive upset on their first night. They ran for, like Matt said, a few months. They didn't really set the world on fire. They dropped the titles to Aries and Strong, and then like all of a sudden they like bring Sal back as basically like Jimmy Rave's like abused henchman, and now he is like the lowest person on the totem pole after. So it's like a complete shift of everything with him at this point in his career.
God, it was great to see Jimmy Rave. That was my really only thought about this match, was like, man, what a delightful performer he was, and what a great act he was with Nana. Just him taking bumps for the toilet paper.
And that's
like, yeah, man.
And that's
Jimmy Rave.
That's what I like about this match is that they got the shtick in. Like, because normally it's a tag team match. So Rave gets to like push Sal around, slap Sal, Nana slap Sal. So they still had them at ringside. Usually Daisy Hayes is there too as part of the act, but she wasn't on this one. But so like the embassy shtick was the part that I enjoyed. And there was one point where Colt called Nana a stupid idiot, which like, wow, Chris Jericho, you really ripped him off with that. But I'd say on the Colt end of things, having watched every Colt Cabana ROH match at this point, this felt like the least inspired version of Colt Cabana, just the most basic comedy stuff that he does. He really didn't add all that much. But I just like this version of the Embassy. I like every version of the Embassy, honestly, that we've seen so far, but so that they really carried their end of things. But overall, I thought this was fairly forgettable. Although I wouldn't say there was anything particularly wrong with it. The crowd liked it as an opener, so it did its purpose.
It was a perfect opener for this show, which is going to have a lot of heavy lifting pro wrestling on it, right? Like, you're going to have, so you have these guys. They got Cabana's going to do some ripped off Johnny Saints spots. Nana's going to do his thing. Rinauro was somebody forgettable in this, but I thought this was like the kind of thing you want as an opener of a show that's going to have a lot of like, a lot of long pro wrestling matches. Some dumb 6-minute stuff that the crowd's going to get into as they're shuffling in for the seats. I thought it was very effective for what they were trying to do.
Yeah, I thought this was perfectly reasonable comedy. This felt like all the Sal Rinauro spots we would get in every recent Sal and Rave tag team in this era, and they just took out all like the serious wrestling they'd get to in the second half of the match. It was just like, let's just do the Sal character work and comedy stuff. And obviously Colt is a guy who can just do a 6 to 8 minute comedy spot match. Sal
in his sleep, basically.
Yeah. And I particularly, it's all spots again, if we've been following the recent shows that you've seen before, except I did really think it was cute where, Sal gets goes to the outside, gets slapped by Jimmy Rave, gets pumped up from the slap, runs back in the ring, charges Colt dodges. He falls out. Sal falls to the other side of the ring where Nana is. Nana slaps him. So I thought that was a cute thing. I think the one thing that really bummed me out watching this match though was, this is a classic wrestling, gimmick where it's, hey, the abused flat lunky who, eventually rises, gets some nerve and stands up. And it almost always works in wrestling if you do it even reasonably well. And I know that was, Rave's idea with this. And yet it's kind of depressing watching this because I looked it up just to make sure. Sal Rinauro only works 2 more weekends in Ring of Honor after this, and as in this era. And the way this angle is written off is basically just at the end of one show, Rave is just I think I'm going to go it alone. And then you don't see Sal Rinauro ever again. So there's never any this angle doesn't even get to the middle stages that they've been doing for a couple of months now. It's just, this is basically the it for a while. But
it's funny because at this point, the Rinauro and Rave team has only really been around for 3 weeks. We just watch one show every 3 weeks, so it feels like it's been going on for months, but from our timeline. But it's super short-lived.
And that brings us to the second match, the Ring of Honor top of the class trophy title match. Shane Hagedorn defends the trophy when he defeats Bobby Dempsey via ref stoppage in 10 seconds when Dempsey was unresponsive in a bulldog choke. Bobby comes out fired up. He's screaming, "Give me my goddamn trophy. Time to get my trophy. Come on, baby." And then someone, presumably staff, comes out just behind Hagedorn as he starts to make his entrance. They couldn't even wait 10 seconds to give him his moment. I thought that is such a Ring of Honor student move. There's a Bobby Dempsey chant, and then the entire match, Hagedorn pulls a foreign object from his trunks. He hits Bobby with it as the ref turns to put away the top of the class trophy, then immediately puts him, the knocked out Dempsey into submission for the ref stoppage. This is one of those things that I wouldn't say get a kick out. That's the wrong thing. But it's always crazy to me when you see a match like this where there is one spot and Bobby Dempsey is bleeding from the nose or mouth. Poor guy. There's one spot and he's busted open.
Might have been the only blood on this show, right?
I think the only other blood that I remember is somebody had their mouth busted a little bit. Maybe it was Joe. I don't remember exactly, but that was it. This is definitely the only major blood on the show.
Guys brought in the author of Way of the Blade on a completely ROH show. I'm certainly not afraid to have blood on ROH shows. I definitely remember tons of bloody matches. It was weird. I thought about this. I mean, I vaguely remember these guys. Hagedorn, I think, is doing a book on ROH.
Yeah, he's doing a book. He also has an ROH podcast too that we've
and he's working for AEW right now. So.
Yeah, we've had some crossover with their podcasts. But yeah, he's writing. He's literally writing the book on ROH, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, from coming out from Hybrid Shoot, the same people who put out my book and future books of mine. So shout out to Shane Hagedorn, a fellow author. But it's weird that ROH basically had no successful students. Is that right? I mean, the Rhett Titus would be the most successful one?
Rhett is definitely the highest profile in terms of his wrestling career, as far as he's still wrestling and was considered a major part of the roster. I mean, Shane had a run for a little while as a major character on the show. He was with the Kings of Wrestling. He was in some big matches. But yeah, it was mainly Rhett was the one. The prodigy of the first class was Davey Andrews, and Shane talks about how nobody has any idea what happened to him. He left wrestling and no one can find him.
Yeah, Shane on his podcast will give out a call. If you know what happened to Davey Andrews, please get in contact with us.
But if you think of something just like the Doghouse, how many successful students came from that, or AIW school, or APW, just all of these other wrestling schools, you can list off the guys who had pretty big careers, or Chikara. I mean, think about the number of Chikara graduates who are in ROH or in AEW right now. And then it's ROH is the best you get is Rhett Titus, who had I don't know, a C+ indie career.
It's
some moments. It hangs around ROH TV, I guess.
It says now, something about how they cultivated their students. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you could point to some fatal flaw in that school that is why those guys didn't get to really succeed at the level that a lot of other schools did. But I'm not expert enough to know what that flaw exactly is.
Well, they brought those guys up early, and a lot of those guys, I mean, the matches like this is par for the course. You're lucky if you get on the show, and if you do get on even if you're not on the show, if you're on the pre-show, you're probably getting a 4-minute match, if that. How many, the students are always used as, jobber, fodder. And it's also funny where, Ring of Honor was always, people have this reputation of it's the big, serious, ultra meat and potatoes wrestling thing. And it's funny, I always thought where, the students, you would assume, they're being taught by CM Punk and then Bryan Danielson and Austin Aries, all these guys. And like every student that caught on at all, like Hagedorn, Bobby Dempsey, Rhett Titus, Grizzly Redwood eventually, like even Pele Primo, it was all because of character work. Like that's what the students that got over, it was never from the matches. It was from like, if these guys are showing personality, if they have a fun gimmick, things like that. So it was like the complete polar opposite of what you think the school would produce. But yeah, I'm sure everyone that was there, you could do like a documentary about their experiences coming up through the school there. So after the match, Adam Pearce enters the ring with a mic. He asks the crowd to give Shane Hagedorn a round of applause. They give him boos. Pearce congratulates Hagedorn on winning the fastest ROH match of all time. The crowd chants for Homicide. Pearce says the problem is Hagedorn's match went so quick that he now has to top to fill the segment. Hagedorn says the crowd doesn't deserve to hear Pearce. He gets the mic. The crowd chants, "Shut the fuck up." Shane sucks up to Pearce as the crowd drowns him out. Shane then shouts, "Respect me. I have a trophy," which I always loved that whenever Shane just like clung to the trophy like that as his entire identity. Pearce tells Shane he likes what he's doing, and if he keeps working, maybe one day Shane can be lieutenant commissioner just like him. He sends Shane off and then talks about the night before saw the Ring of Honor return of the great Steve Corino. Pearce then calls BJ Whitmer out to the ring and even holds the ropes open for him when he enters. Pearce says after Homicide attacked him last night, he saw BJ standing over him doing nothing. He says he goes over how during the Ring of Honor CZW feud they fought together. Pearce says they didn't do it for the fans, they did it for Jim Cornette. Then he says, we drove to the building tonight, me and you, BJ, and we maybe said a half dozen words to each other in the entire drive. Pearce needs to know if BJ will do Cornette's bidding, follow his orders to destroy Homicide. Is he with Pearce or against him? BJ tries to play the middle. He says, I respect you, Adam, but I also respect Homicide for standing up for Ring of Honor. He continues, but Steve Corino sneaks up from behind, attacks him. Corino says Homicide is a scared piece of garbage. Pearce stops Corino from attacking Whitmer more, saying BJ will come around. He then tells Homicide to find a tag partner for tonight. So setting up a very obvious partner for the match later.
This was still early enough in the feud that the crowd was like interested in where this was all going, because I feel like, maybe it was the match quality or just dragged on for too long, but I feel like all the stuff with Homicide and Pearce kind of ended up dragging on and dying a bit with the crowds as the year went on until we finally got to that to the Homicide and Danielson match that everyone was really waiting for.
Yeah, I'm really interested to like kind of revisit this feud because we just went over that quote from Gabe MySpace of all places a few shows ago where he talked about like looking back being like the Homicide like Pearce Cornette feud didn't really turn out the way I thought it would. I don't know why. I'm kind of looking forward to like maybe as we keep watching these segments because on paper I remember me and a lot of people we were super excited the idea of more Homicide and Steve Corino like.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah. Phil, I know from Segunda Caída. I know you are huge on the, that Corino 2003 Homicide match from Bitter Friends, Different Enemies. That is just an unbelievable, one of the better matches in the company history.
Arguably the best match in RH history, I think. I was at that one live, and that's one of my favorite 5 or 6 live matches I've ever been.
Well, the match they end up having in 2006 is not on that level, and I think that's part of the problem too.
But
we'll talk about that tag when we get to it too.
Yeah.
I did get a kind of kick out of the sections that they had against each other, and it was just a match.
Next we have
a giant either Adam Pearce or BJ Whitmer guy, so it's like their kind of presence in this was like I really appreciated the parts of that match where they just focused the camera only on Homicide.
Next, we get the non-title 4-corner survival match. Nigel McGuinness defeats Christopher Daniels, Claudio Castagnoli, and Jay Lethal in 11 minutes, 49 seconds when he pinned Castagnoli after the rebound lariat. This was right at the end, Phil, of Nigel McGuinness's whole like pure champion run where the show after this, he unifies the belts with Danielson and kind of a different chapter of his career. So this was kind of the end of like mid-card heel Nigel, although he had already phased out quite a bit of that out by this point. What do you think about this match? Through the years, I'm generally kind of sick to death of four-ways because I've seen a million Ring of Honor four-ways like this. But I'm wondering what you think as a guy that hasn't watched, probably revisited a lot of this stuff.
It's okay. That's kind of my thought of it. It was fine. I haven't watched a lot of Nigel in a long time, and I did appreciate the rebound there is really stupid, but he really does like lariat the fuck out of the guys when he hits it. So I was like, oh man, I remember Nigel really would clothesline the shit out of somebody. So I enjoyed that, and Claudio's fun, and as a guy, I mean, I don't know, it was very forgettable. Probably the least memorable in some ways match on this show, in the sense of when you say, okay, I remember about this match outside of that last lariat. I guess Claudio and Daniels are feuding, I guess is the sense I got. I didn't remember the Claudio Daniels feud at all, but that would seem to be the focus of this.
You could forgive him.
I guess out of all the other ones, even the first two matches, there was some things I felt like I could say about it, whereas at this match it was just kind of it was a really nice clothesline.
The only story of all of this was they did a whole angle at the 100th show where, Christopher Daniels never shook hands in Ring of Honor. He chose Claudio to be the first guy. And of course, with the main event that night, that was the night Claudio turned on Ring of Honor to join CZW. So they had kind of teased right after that, you're going to get a Claudio Daniels feud or at least a match down the line. They never really pick up on it. This is months later. And or at least weeks later, and it's a bunch of shows later, and this is the first time Daniels and Claudio are in the ring together since that angle. So that's why Daniels really kind of is going after Claudio in this match. But I thought this was a standard. It was a reasonably, by the standards of the random ass Ring of Honor 4-corner matches, I thought this was fairly enjoyable. They work the match like they are feuding and really don't like each other. Daniels jumps immediately to try and kill him. Claudio builds out the earliest opportunity, only tags in against Daniels. He has the advantage of the very classic basic heel psychology. There's even a nice bit where Claudio spits on Alice in Danger, and then she gets revenge later by breaking up a Claudio suplex by throwing water on him. So, although the cameras don't do a great job catching that, the rest of the four-way falls pretty standard Ring of Honor template. It's four ways. It's fairly slow in the first half, a lot of mat wrestling that I enjoyed decently enough, and then the second half kind of kicks into a higher gear. But the one thing I kind of like about this four-way, or at least I'll say it amuses me, is it does the thing we've seen in the four-ways occasionally, and I always love this, where wrestlers who don't want to work a certain match, so they make the match the kind of match they wish they would want. We've seen this a few times in a four-way where, you know what? I'm in a four-way, but I would much rather just work a regular tag. So at one point, you just see Daniels decide, there are two faces in this match. There are two heels in this match. I'm going to be face in peril. Let the two heels kind of tag in and out and control me for a while, and then I'll make a hot tag to Jay Lethal. And we've seen that a few four-ways where guys just decide, let's just turn this into a tag match because you know what? That's easier to do and to have kind of like a big story beat like that. But, and yeah, this is also Jay Lethal's final Ring of Honor match until 2011. So another guy that's getting, he hadn't really been a regular in at this point, but another guy who's kind of saying goodbye here. Matt, what do you think? Yeah,
Lethal's presence in ROH at all at this point really feels like sort of makeshift, like he's filling in for people, basically. Kind of doing them a favor, and, they're in his home turf. So I guess that's why he's able to do the shows. I thought this was
Jay Lethal's first ever pro wrestling match. In the kind of, what's the band you saw before they got big moment.
Yeah, wow.
I think his first ever match was a JPW show. He worked a guy named Rainchild. And it was pretty good. I remember watching, I was like, wow, these guys are really debuting. These guys are, these guys are pretty good. They gave them some, the difference, I guess, between your JPW rookies and your ROH rookies, right, is these guys got a chance to have like a showcase match. But yeah, that's really my only thoughts about Jay Lethal as a wrestler.
Yeah, Jay Lethal was at the end of his. Jay was at the end of his first ROH run here, and he was still only like 21 years old at this point. So he was pretty good, very young. But this match, I pointed this out to Trevor. It's, I think, the only four-way that we've seen. We've seen a lot of four-ways where every single guy in the match is, as of 2023, currently under AEW contract. and 3 of them have wrestled on AEW and ROH TV in this calendar year. And I guess, Trevor, you'd know better than me, like the rumors about Nigel. I don't know. Do you think it's likely that he'll end up wrestling again? I don't know. If you had to predict?
I mean, I think at this point, the way they kept teasing it, the way Daniels has been going after him in press conference, I think like Nigel was even like joking about, I was supposed to wrestle Danielson, but he broke his arm. Like they're certainly playing around with it. And I think, again, we talked about on a recent show, like if Nigel is ever going to have one more match at a giant, packed Wembley Stadium, I mean, you're never going to get a better opportunity to have one more match than this. So I would be, at this point, I would be shocked if he doesn't have one more match, because otherwise I think you just come out and immediately flat deny it. I don't know why you would get people's hopes up with all these little teases they've been doing.
Yeah,
it's a weird masturbatory match to have on a big show like that, though, in the sense that, like Danielson's a big star in that promotion, and having a match with an announcer playing off some feud from 17 years ago would be a weird for him to be where he theoretically, if his arm heals in time, he should be in a big main event.
It's funny. Like I agree. I feel like in the Ring of Honor family is like, I just want to see it because it'd be great for my nostalgia. But like, it's funny what does and doesn't catch, like maybe pass on to people, because I was shocked on like the second collision in that 8-man tag or the first, the first collision, it was the 6-man where Joe and Punk square off. The crowd went apeshit for it, like just them standing off. And I was like, there were, how many people watched that at the time, and I realized that, Joe Punk has probably a little more cachet than Nigel Danielson does. But I was shocked even that, a crowd of like 3,000 people, up in Canada were going nuts for something again that, the entire history of that was early Ring of Honor that, wasn't that big of a company. It was smaller than Ring of Honor is at this point.
Yeah, but what's weird about it is like, a lot of this ROH stuff, it's kind of a wonder to me how it's grown in kind of in legend and lore over the past, 20 to 18 years. And at least with the matches like Joe and Punk and Danielson and Nigel, those matches are available to watch on YouTube. But like when it comes to something like the Final Countdown, if you watch any of those YouTube videos, that's cut out. It's not available on Honor Club or anything. How do so many people know about and get excited for Danielson coming out to the Final Countdown? Very few people watched ROH when he was coming out to that music. And you had whole arenas of people singing along and going crazy when the music started. I really don't understand how that sort of thing happens. You get like shows like that where like a TV show or a movie or whatever is not watched by that many people when it's new, and then it just kind of grows and grows and becomes a cult favorite over many years. But at least, with that, there's streaming, there's ways people can watch it. I have no idea how the Final Countdown became so legendary to people that have, I'm sure, never seen Bryan Danielson come out to that music.
Yeah, and even like when Punk did that throwback thing in AEW where he came out to AFI and did the ring jacket, like people like you and me, Matt, were going crazy over the callback. The crowd largely, I got the impression, was like, what? Like, where's Cult of Personality? So it is interesting, again, like what things kind of catch on from from Ring of Honor in this era, and what things like, maybe it's just a market thing even that just completely fly over people's heads and go, why is Punk like, why isn't he doing his normal music?
Yeah.
Yeah, Forbidden Door is your most hardcore audience, though, right? Too.
Yeah.
But I have to think that like if he came out to that in Wembley or like Grand Slam, it would get a similarly big reaction. I guess those are also like some of the most hardcore audiences too, though.
Yeah.
As far as the match, I thought it was mostly formula. I did think that the final sequence was a little bit peppier than normal and was pretty fun. The part where, Daniels hits a series of clotheslines on Claudio, then he hits the STO and then the Death Valley Driver on Nigel, and then he goes for the best moonsault ever, and Claudio moves, Danielson lands on his feet, gets super kicked by Nigel, then Lethal does that backflip kick, which I really like. That's sort of like something he's been doing more in these later ROH appearances. And then Claudio hits he throws him up, hits the European uppercut, and then, Daniels does the flatliner thing, and then all four are down, and the crowd goes crazy. I told you that I'm kind of a mark for spots like that. The other thing is, how many matches at this point has Nigel won with the rebound lariat? I feel like this is really when he transitions from it being a mid-match move to being a finisher. I don't think he's won too many matches with it. So I like that, because I think that does become a really over finisher. And like Phil said, Nigel does, lariat the crap out of people.
Yeah, Nigel's interesting to watch because he really, when he starts, people forget this, rewatching these shows, when he first does the rebound for the first few shows, it's not a rebound lariat, it's a rebound into a schoolboy. Then he starts to realize, I could do a rebound lariat, but it's just a random tossed off spot in the middle of matches. And then he starts to realize, like you were saying around this point probably, where it's this is one of the most showy spots I have, and it starts becoming the finisher.
I mean, it mostly sucks, right? That is a spot. That spot sucks. He's the best of it, mainly because he followed the stupid rebound thing up with usually a fucking brutal lariat. So it's okay, well, the rebound's stupid, but the lariat at least looks great. Moxley's version is terrible. It's mostly a shitty spot.
Well, Moxley's version we can agree on, but Nigel's does get extremely over in this ROH audience. I think he actually wins the title with it. Now that I think about it, so he really gets a lot of mileage out of it.
Yeah, okay. Lots of things that suck are popular.
I mean, for me, it's one of those spots where it's showing up that kind of makes up for sometimes the disbelief you have to suspend. But there are occasionally times where you see the move where it's one of those moves where if the guy just takes an extra half second too long, it really accentuates the ridiculousness of it. If the guy kind of loses their grip when they're leaning back in the ropes just for that extra second, and the guy's just standing there more while the other guy's basically let me get my balance. Just wait there. That's when it gets kind of funny. But
the version of Nigel's lariat that I think is the least consistent is the one where the guy is straddling the top rope, because sometimes he hits that and it's like a killer, and sometimes it's just totally off, and it kind of kills the spot a little bit. I feel like that's the one where I'm maybe you don't need to do that one so often.
I also kind of hate those spots where a guy needs to be suspending himself in the ropes, waiting for somebody to hit him like a ropes course spot too. As a rule, I usually think those suck too. But I like Nigel. I feel I'm very hard on him, but he's a guy I remember really enjoying. Although I honestly think this is probably the first Nigel McGuinness match I've watched in over a decade. Not a guy.
If we just wanted to refresh on Nigel, we definitely could have picked, he looks good here, but in some respects, but we definitely could have picked, the next show is a better show for that. But, next we go backstage to find Davey Richards and Kenta. Davey Richards talks about how he came to ROH to take on the best, calls it a dream to take on his Japanese mentor, Kenta. Kenta simply says, "Tonight, I test you." So they were leaning heavy into this. Kenta is Davey Richards, that Kenta, Davey Richards was Kenta's American protege, which I like that suggests that maybe Kenta has proteges in a variety of countries, lots of hoes in different area codes. But, that brings
Trevor.
us to,
I'm just kidding.
That brings us to the ROH World Tag Team Title Ultimate Endurance match. Austin Aries and Roderick Strong defeat Irish Airborne of Dave Christ and Jake Christ. They also defeat Jack Evans and Matt Sydal and the Briscoes of J and Mark Briscoe, 17 minutes, 2 seconds. First falls the scramble match. Irish Airborne eliminate the Briscoes when Jake Christ pinned Jay after the Irish Air Raid. Second falls the tap out match. Aries and Strong eliminated the Irish Airborne, where Strong made Dave Christ tap out to the Stronghold. Then the final fall, as always, how you end a big different stip every fall match with that classic no stip final fall. Aries and Strong eliminate Evans and Sydal, where Aries pinned Sydal after a 450. This is another one of those Ultimate Endurances matches I thought that would have been better if it wasn't an Ultimate Endurance match. The Ultimate Endurance match the night before, it opens with a really short, really fast-paced, kind of wild, just spotty scramble portion with a big dive train where, Jay Briscoe gets back body dropped to the floor. Roddy even does a dive. Aries kills poor Jack Evans on that, heat-seeking missile tope. And then it quickly ends in just a few minutes when the Briscoes get eliminated completely clean, kind of out of nowhere when they've been getting pushed really hard for that rematch with Aries and Strong they're getting on the next show. And the crowd's completely shocked by this, and apparently even more so that it comes out.
I certainly didn't remember the Irish Airborne getting fall in this match. Like, holy shit, the Briscoes got beat by these clowns? I was also very shocked in my living room. I don't know, when I watched this about an hour and a half ago. I was like, fuck, they lost the... the Christ, which is the canceled Christ? Dave is the canceled Christ. Jake.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
One of the Christs has been canceled, right?
Yes.
I think it's Dave. I think I saw Jake.
Jake is now coming back. Yeah,
I saw Jake work a lucha show in Colorado recently. I don't remember who he wrestled, but they have a weird lucha. They have a lot of lucha in Colorado, which is where I live now. And one of them is a lucha promotion that brings in lots of like also kind of weird U.S. indie guys sometimes, along with like luchadors. And so I think I saw Jake Chris wrestle recently live. If he's I saw the uncanceled Chris.
Yeah, I don't think the other one is wrestling, but yeah. And looking at like doing my research as I do for the podcast, this was like the thing that got like the most talk after the show, other than just like the top two matches for like, oh, that was a fucking choice. So in fact, Meltzer would write based on live notes from fans and the Observer, crowd was into this match early, but when Irish Airborne eliminated the Briscoes, the crowd crapped on it because they didn't buy it and wanted Briscoes in the final. The last fall was real strong and saved it as the crowd had turned it off early. The booking rationale is that Gabe Sapolsky didn't want Aries and Strong versus the Briscoes in the final as he's saving that match. And with the second fall of this match being a submission fall, he didn't want the Briscoes tapping out. So he figured to surprise people, he'd have the shocking finish. But the people weren't down with it, and don't expect any ultimate endurance matches again for a while. So yeah, this was the match based on that reaction that kills this stip that Gabe tried for quite a while to like get over by having it happen once in a while. And yeah, it's really weird booking in the sense that Irish Airborne, it kind of had felt by this point that Gabe had kind of, like previous to this, not too many shows earlier, the Irish Airborne had kind of had a very mid, like at best match with the Briscoes where they really underachieved, where it felt like that was their opportunity to really kind of show something. And after that, it felt like definitely like the push, any push they were being given was kind of cut off. And so it's really, shocking to see them beat the Briscoes in the first fall. And then not only that, you would think, okay, I'm not the hugest Irish Airborne fan, but if you're going to give them a big fall over the Briscoes, at least have them have a good run to the end of the match, get to the final fall. Instead, the crazy thing is, immediately after they eliminate the Briscoes, the second fall, I would say the Christs, one or the other, are in for the entire length of the second fall. And I would say they get 10% of the offense, if that. Like, basically, eliminate the Briscoes, everyone gets pissed at them for eliminating the Briscoes, and then immediately transition to a fall where they basically just get ground down by the other four guys and unceremoniously eliminated to just, I guess, emphasize what a fucking fluke that first fall. Like, you got nothing out of this, and it was a decision that fans didn't like to begin with. And then the final fall, Aries and Strong, and Seidel and Jack Evans, it's like a Generation Next collides after they had just broken up. That probably could have sold a couple tickets if you just ran that match here and build that. And I thought, it was very just a bunch of spots, but I thought it was kind of like fun, shut your mind off for that. I thought like, the first and third falls were fun in that kind of sense. Second fall, I think these submission falls kind of grind things down to a fall. You saw both Roddy and Jack forget that the second fall was a submission and go for covers during that. So it was just kind of an unceremonious end to the ultimate endurance gimmick. But Matt, what'd you think about it?
Yeah,
go
on, yeah.
So go ahead, Phil.
So I was saying, I think it's kind of interesting. My thought about this is I really enjoyed this match. I think it was because I'm not watching these kind of matches with these guys in it all the time like I would have been in 2006 or like you guys are.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, I don't know. Jack Evans. I remember Jack Evans. Like, Austin Aries is a guy I really liked in this period, and Roddy Strong's a guy I still kind of like. So it was like kind of fun to just watch, like, these guys doing their thing. Aries got a really great tope. I hadn't seen that in a long time. That's a guy who's kind of justifiably disappeared, weirded himself out of pro wrestling. And watch real Jack Evans really when he was like a real athletic marvel. Still kind of is, but obviously slowed down a ton. What is this? 16 years later, 17 years later. I saw him live in Mexico last year, Jack Evans, on a big lucha show that I was in doing on a work trip. So I went to a bunch of lucha shows in Mexico City. Saw him then. It's like, oh, Jack Evans, this guy I used to really like, and so it was fun to see him. So I really liked this, but I can imagine that I would have liked it less contemporaneously and less if I was doing the lunatic thing that you two are doing, going back and watching everything ROH.
Yeah,
like by then I would probably I've seen some variation of these guys in a bunch of matches with each other, and I remember all the spots, but I was kind of like looking at it somewhat anew, was into it. I was like, oh man, these guys are better than the versions of these guys that exist now. It feels like I enjoyed this more than I would enjoy a Young Bucks, Lucha Brothers, Martin Brothers, somebody else four-way, if that ran a AEW. Like the equivalent of that now, I think I liked this more than I would like that.
Well, now they got to run it, do a head-to-head comparison, and find a team that will piss the crowd off when they eliminate a team that the crowd really likes in the first fall. I think all
these guys are still active. Well, not except Jay Briscoe and the canceled Christ. I mean, you could run this now.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. And I guess it might be hard to get AEW to book Aries, but maybe not. I don't know. I probably split the difference between the two of you. I think I liked it more than Trevor. I will say live that Briscoe's elimination really fucked things up much worse than it seems on DVD. That was very memorable. Just the crowd just shit on this after that. But even live, that final fall did get the crowd back into it. I really enjoyed the final fall a lot. I thought that it was just fun, well-timed, cool stuff, short and, kind of easy to digest. So it was nothing that really sticks with you or anything. But yeah, I'm surprised they never did that 2-on-2 match that got a little bit more time, because I think it would have been a real crowd pleaser. As it was, they just kind of saved this from ruining the crowd for the rest of the night. But man, were people pissed when the Briscoes got eliminated, especially since people already were kind of not feeling Irish Airborne. And now they had reason to be really mad at them because the Briscoes were super over at this point. So, that was definitely the most memorable thing in the match.
Brother tag teams in wrestling, right? There's probably hundreds.
Yeah.
The Briscoes are in a top tier, right?
Yeah, we talked about this right after Jay died. It was their run is just, I'd say, I think people are kind of revisiting it now and kind of saying, kind of giving them their due. But for a long time, I would say they were kind of underrated in wrestling history.
Yeah. And what I would say, Phil, you have so much knowledge. I was just going to ask, I think we were talking about this on the show. I can't think of many wrestlers that were good so early and so young and then proceeded to have such a long, consistent run from that point. It's crazy to start good basically at 17 and then just keep at it for 2 decades, consistently, never really missing.
It's prodigy guys, right? It's guys like Rey Mysterio and Santo was pretty good from the beginning, and Jun Akiyama was great from almost the start. But yeah, the Briscoes were really. I was at CZW Best of the Best, where they had their match against each other, and I got 2001 maybe.
Yeah, they were 16 and 17, I think, probably.
16 and 17. You're like, what is this? These guys are nuts. They totally stole that show. And there was some, big name guys on that show that they were stealing it from. Udo Guerrero was on that show. Winger was on that show. Takekudo Hidaka was on that show. Some guys with some real careers. And those two kids just completely stole that entire show. But yeah. So, they would be on the top tier, and it'd probably Irish Airport be near the bottom, right? For you talking about your brother tag teams, we're talking about the Cole twins. I don't know where would you rank them versus the Harrises? I'm trying to think of sort of shittier brother tag teams.
The other thing I noticed in this match, I love this was This was the era where Jack Evans and Matt Sydal just came back from a big Dragon Gate tour, and so they were like proudly wearing those jackets everywhere. And then I was watching that, and I was like, oh, look, he's so happy. And then for some reason, Jack Evans brought a giant jug of water to the ring and like carried it with him. And then like he picks up at the, I don't know if he was just really thirsty on this night, or but I would love to know why Jack Evans was compelled to bring a gigantic plastic jug of water to this one match. This was not a regular Jack Evans thing. So
I have a Matt Sydal anecdote / joke. So I saw him for the first time I went to Georgia with my buddy Tom Carroll-Gassner to go see a lucha show, like that was a headline by El Hijo de Santo, L.A. La Parca, which is an incredible match that exists on tape, but is a full version, is never been able to find anything more than like a really clipped version from Japanese TV. One of the up there with Homicide Carino is one of the best matches I've ever seen live. But we also went to a Wild Side show the night before with Chris Zellner. So a true meeting of the internet wrestling dork legends. And Sydal was working that show well before. And I remember thinking when I was watching this, I was thinking, man, this Matt Sydal is a young, handsome-looking boy. I bet if Feinstein ever sees him, he'll definitely get booked at ROH. Like, I was making that joke, and this was before the whole thing. So clearly we all knew what was fucking going on with Feinstein, because I remember making that joke about Feinstein before the thing with the LOL, pretend you said 18. Like, this was before that happened. But clearly that was at least a thing that people knew about Feinstein enough to joke that, man, that he's gonna completely lose it if he ever sees this Matt Sydal who looks 14 and like a Teen Beat star.
Ironically, Sydal didn't show up until the first show right after that whole thing happened.
Right. It's kind of ironic. But I also remember, like, we always used to tell, like, make jokes also about how Rob Naylor needed to stay away from Feinstein. Because Rob Naylor is somebody who, when he was in his, like, 20s, looked like he was, like, 14 years old. So we were always like, Feinstein's coming by. Hide Rob.
Well, you know, it's funny. Like, one of our most well-received episodes was we did a whole Feinstein episode where we just went way too much detail about. But like, it was funny. Like, I talked at one point, about like how Rob had like a reputation before even the scandal and stuff. And I like listening to you talk right now where you're talking about, people knew about it. It's like, I knew about that. And the reason why is because I read the Death Valley Driver message board, because you guys constantly would make jokes and talk about it. So like a lot of the rumors and not just like even the most untoward things, just like, that was the reason I was scared to buy videos from RF Video, because I would read the message boards of like how shitty the service and take quality could be and things like that. It was like you guys were kind of like the warning signal.
He used to get fucking coked up, I'm assuming, or drunk, and
allegedly.
Whatever, fuck him. Let him sue me. And spam the board. Early days of the green board. So I would show up at my temp job or something like that when I was like 25. I was temping at some place. And I have to spend like the first 15 minutes of whatever work day I had deleting like dick pics and the N-word and like all this stuff that Feinstein would like spam the board at in the middle of the night on like a bender. So I'm not a fan of that guy. But even before this all happened, I remember I was at the show where Shinya Hashimoto, it was a four-way with Shinya Hashimoto came to America. It was Shinya Hashimoto, Carino, Dylan Knight, and some British guy. God, fuck, why can't I remember the British guys? This is what happens when you get old, guys. Gary Steele. Did you guys ever see that match?
No, it's safe to say I don't think Matt or I have it.
No, I didn't see it, yeah.
It's fucking incredible. It's on YouTube. It's like a Iron Man match, so it goes like 30 minutes. And it's like Shinya Hashimoto wrestling in front of like nobody. But like is one of my favorite wrestling moments of my entire life is watching Shinya Hashimoto in front of like 80 people in this thing. But I remember Feinstein was like working the show or taping the show or something. And I remember we parked right by his car. And I was like, I have to take a piss. I'm just going to piss all over his fucking car. And I just pissed on his car. That's my Rob Feinstein experience. I don't know if I ever actually had a conversation with him, but I did piss all over his car once before a show where Shinya Hashimoto wrestled. I also remember, speaking of absolutely repellent, disgusting people from the early days of ROH. Rockin' Rebel.
Yeah.
Where Rockin' Rebel had the ring. So you had to like watch him have a shitty match. Before those are on tapes. You guys probably haven't revisited any of this.
Yeah, they definitely did not show any of them on the DVDs. Yeah, not at all.
Yeah. So for those who haven't listened to like a while, because we haven't talked about it in a while, yeah, Rock and Rebel had the Pennsylvania promoter's license. Ring of Honor couldn't get like their own promoter's license, so they had to use his. And Rock and Rebel would let you borrow it if you let him work a match. And so there'd be a bunch of, if you ever look at the results for Philly Ring of Honor shows of a certain era, and you go, where are these fucking Rock and Rebel matches that didn't make the DVD? That was basically the price you paid to promote in Philly.
The fans paid the price too when they had to fucking watch it. Somebody had to watch a bunch of those shitty Rock and Rebel versus Drew Blood or Drew. I think it was a Drew Blood handed Drew money, and I think there were two different guys, or maybe it was the same guy who changed his gimmick name, or maybe I'm not even remembering that right. But Rock and Rebel was out there, and then Rock and Rebel loudly Norio Hoshikawa worked that show too, with Hashimoto as like a 0-1 came over with him as part of 0-1. And during Hoshikawa's match, which was like it was a tag, I can't remember the result. It was like a mini tag tournament that he was in, maybe teaming with Red of a team of extremely short people. But like Rock and Rebel loudly yelling like anti-Japanese slurs. Like, I can't believe people want to watch this, racial slur wrestle and, just like us, I almost thought about going to fight Rock and Rebel. Like, I considered it. I was like, I don't want to get kicked out of this show before. This is my only chance to see it, Shinny Hashimoto live. Going over and sucker punching Rock and Rebel is probably not a great idea. It was definitely something that 26-year-old Phil would consider, and 46-year-old Phil would never consider. But, you're younger and you got some testosterone. I remember at least thinking about it because he was just such a loud, disgusting, obnoxious prick at this show. But did shut the fuck up when Shinya Hashimoto showed up. I mean, I remember he seemed like he wasn't making racial slurs to Shinya Hashimoto. And I think that first time Hashimoto kicked Dylan Knight in the lungs, I remember him garnering the Rock and Rebels respect. I don't know, we talked about that. But when you do through the PWF, Premier Wrestling Federation podcast, after through the ROH years is over, you have me on for that episode.
Trevor, we have a project for our 50s.
Yeah.
Don't you all miss the 2000s indies with those stories?
I fucking miss the 2000s indies, man. The 2000s indies ruled. Yeah. Like, not just ROH, but your lesser lights. There was still some really awesome shit going on, ICW, and what was the one that used to run New York City that have the 6-hour long shows?
Oh, gosh. No, I was that the promotion that would do like the in the early aughts, like the Low Key and Xavier matches and stuff.
Yeah. They would have those, and they would also, their shows would be like 6 hours long.
Shit, if Naylor was here, he'd remember the letters.
Taylor would definitely remember it. I should also remember. It's just I for some reason am blanking on the names of these. USA Pro.
Yes.
USA Pro is the name of the promotion. Yes, and so you got these tapes, and the tape would be like 3 video cassettes because the shows would be so long. But you just get them because there'd be like one cool Homicide match or a cool Xavier match in between. And then there would be like 10 student matches. And then, the main event would be, Just Incredible versus Devon Dudley or something like that. Balls Mahoney versus Axel Rotten. Those would be always your main events would always be kind of washed ECW dudes. But on the third from the top would be some incredible Homicide or Loki or Xavier match.
Well, I guess that was ROH's whole idea. Is we do these shows, but we just do that incredible match that's third from the top, and we just do a whole show of those. I guess that was the concept.
That's what it was. Feinstein was distributing all of these shows, JPW shows and USA Pro shows and ICW. Yeah, that really was. I think that really was the idea. It was we'll just do this without Balls Mahoney.
Balls Mahoney had a surprisingly good match with Samoa Joe in 2003 or early 2004, maybe. I forget. That was that Jersey All Pro and ROH had a co-promoted show, and that was like one of the top matches. It's a weird show, but
but that was pretty. Balls Mahoney had like an amateur background, so every once in a while you go to one of these shows and like Balls Mahoney would do like 3 minutes of like like ground control or parterre work or something. I'm like, oh, Balls Mahoney could really kind of mat wrestle a little bit, not to the level of Ian Rotten as like an incredible mat wrestler for a guy well known as an ECW garbage wrestler, but like a much lesser version of Ian Rotten, where every once in a while it's like Balls Mahoney, like work like a grounded arm bar. Grapple a little bit.
After the match,
when you mentioned Phil, we don't mind if you go on some tangents.
Hey, no, you know what? Like this is the draw. This is the draw of the show, Phil. So don't feel bad at all.
This is this is a big kick for me, because this is like getting Death Valley Driver book on tape. It's like so many of the things you're talking about are things like I discovered from reading you saying things like this. So like hearing you out loud now say these things to me is a weird little thrill. But
what? Grandpa Phil is telling his stories again.
No,
guys, I remember this time I pissed on Rob Feinstein's car.
Phil, I promise this episode of Through the Years is going to be a collector's item for people that listen to this podcast. So don't feel bad at all.
So after the match, Aries gets on the mic. He talks about how they're still missing their Ring of Honor tag title belts. Tells the crowd someone stole them. They're going to find out who and teach them something about respect. So obviously, this is I believe this is Matt. My memory is always awful, but it's like the angle that brings Hero and Claudio as the Kings of Wrestling into Ring of Honor. But I always think it's funny, like in indie wrestling, you can never be 100% sure if it was a pre-planned angle or if people just forgot to bring the title belts to a show. Like there's always that chance that they just have to run with it. Who knows? But
okay. So did ROH make the? I mean, I assume they did. They made the wrestlers, bring the belts around with them, right? Like they okay, you take them. So I would assume that Aries and Strong both didn't forget. But yeah, I'd say either way, it was a fairly unmemorable and ineffective way to bring in the Kings of Wrestling. But whatever, it's fine.
And so it's intermission. We join Colt Cabana backstage. He's almost immediately interrupted by Lacey. Colt calls her a cutie pie. She says she's in no mood. Asks Colt if he's heard about the rumors going around about the two of them. They've been these rumors going around the locker room and on the internet. Colt denies knowing anything. Lacey tells Colt to put a stop to rumors. She walks away. The camera and Colt both perv on her behind as she does so, as is typical of Ring of Honor on this era. Just continuing that little angle, putting a little toe in the water. But that brings us to, after intermission, Adam Pearce and Steve Corino take on BJ Whitmer and Homicide. It goes to a no contest when the Briscoes ran and attacked Homicide in 15 minutes, 30 seconds. So as soon as Corino and Pearce make their entrance, Corino gives Bobby Cruz a hug that Cruz clearly does not want, which was an enjoyable facial reaction. And Corino takes the mic. The crowd chants for Homicide immediately. Corino asks if that's supposed to make him scared. He says the only thing that scares him are some of the fans in this building. He mocks one fan for being so fat that they charged him for 2 tickets. A different large fan, and this might have to be the image for the show, a different large fan in a different section proceeds to stand up, slap his ass at Corino, and then remove his shirt and get really pumped up. Pearce actually takes a bump for this. We get a holy shit chant. Corino asks if someone is going to milk this fan and then tells him he's going to die in a year. Steve points out that they have a celebrity in attendance, Green Lantern fan's dad. Pearce says they should kick his ass right now. Green Lantern fan's dad flips them off. Corino asks him how it feels to have the biggest piece of shit for a son. He said, I'd ask your mom, but she's in the back having sex with all the boys. Corino then asks, where's the fan savior? Where's the man? Where's Homicide? Cue Homicide's music, comes in, fights Pearce and Corino 1-on-2 for a short bit, loses out, but then outraces BJ Whitmer to make this a tag match. BJ attacks Corino. Pearce pulls BJ off. It's like, you got to make a choice, even though it seems pretty obvious. He just made a choice. Me or Homicide. BJ attacks Pearce. The match goes on. And then we get the match, which is like, I feel, again, I know I'll let you start this off because I know you're a big connoisseur of the world of Corino and Homicide.
No, he's a really big BJ Whitmer fan. That's what he's told us earlier.
Yeah, then really, at this point in history, the best time to be a BJ Whitmer fan, and to say that would be at this point in 2023. But this was basically like one of those tales of two matches where it's like hard crowd brawl, and then they kind of just everyone settles back into a more sedate standard tag. But what'd you think about this?
Crowd brawl part was pretty great. The sedate tag was sedate. That didn't do. I mean, Whitmer and Pierce are two of your lesser lights in the history of Ring of Honor in a lot of ways. It's like those two guys show up. It's just like, weren't they in like some sort of like, were they in some sort of group with Bret Albright? I remember
about a year later that started. Yeah,
bums are all part of one group together. And Whitmer obviously had his moments, right? I mean, he's had some great matches, but for the most part, your average BJ Whitmer match is pretty bad. And Pierce, same thing. Like when they're not like bleeding or being part of some big brawl, but there's like working a bog standard tag, not great. I mean, I always love Carino Homicide. This is not the Carino Homicide you're going to point to when you talk about how great their stuff is. But I enjoyed it and loved Julius Smokes as like a guy, and I didn't really remember much of this period of Carino Homicide. So it was like I was sort of, like I said, fading a little away from ROH at this point. So I didn't really remember Carino Homicide, this era of it. I don't think it ended up being that great, right?
Yeah, that's the big.
I'd say what they did in this match was a lot better than what they ended up doing in their singles match a few months later in Philly. So if that's any indication of.
But I mean, that match in Connecticut I saw live and their barbed wire match are both absolute Stone Cold classics.
That's what makes it so disappointing.
We are on record of agreeing with both of those statements, I would say, yeah.
Yeah, we always after we rewatch every show in a year, we kind of give out awards, and we unanimously agree that Carino Homicide, like the first match, that's just the best match of that year. And so I
fire match. I did a barbed wire piece for the Ringer, and I rewatched that barbed wire match and was blown away about how great I thought that was for something I didn't remember, like contemporaneously thinking was incredible. But watching that a second time, I was like, holy shit, this is great. God damn, Homicide is taking some fucking insane bumps in it. Like he just kept he'd do all these bumps where he'd get like tied, with his like Achilles tied up in the barbed wire like multiple times, and looked like he was gonna end up needing reproductive surgery on his like tendons after that match. Just totally crazy.
Well, so Phil, if you're talking about ROH barbed wire matches that you don't remember, the week before this was the second ever ROH barbed wire match, and believe it or not, it was between BJ Whitmer and the Necro Butcher. And Trevor and I both liked it. I'd be very curious to know if you like it, because the thing is with Pierce and Whitmer, they definitely, their best stuff in ROH was the stuff they did during that CZW feud, which had just ended. This was definitely like on the low end of their performances. They were not feeling it on this night at all, even by their standards, I would say. Almost like they were like recovering from all the crazy shit, especially Whitmer. Whitmer did some insane shit the week before in that match with Necro. So it was really it was up to Homicide and Carino to carry this match, and their stuff was good, and all the other stuff was pretty bad.
I had that Whitmer Necro Butcher. I had that as 13 on my list of the 20 best barbed wire matches for when I did the Ringer. So I did like it. I liked it a lot.
Is good.
It was really good BJ Whitmer performance.
This really was we've been talking about recent episodes. This was basically the peak of BJ Whitmer's career in the sense of I don't think he would ever be more over, because for the timeline he had, in the last few months he had done those two early Jimmy Jacobs matches with the one where he power bombs Jimmy into the crowd, and the other one before that where they slip and nearly die, which got big buzz. Then they did the CZW feud, which like Matt said got his performance was pretty good in that and got some real buzz. He had that Super Dragon match, and then then he had the barbed wire match with Necro Butcher. So like this is a point, like even on this show, like he's getting chances. Like the only time in his career I can remember in like Ring of Honor, like BJ Whitmer actually like getting solo chances of like this is kind of even though this is not a peak BJ Whitmer performance, you're actually kind of seeing basically him like the show after, one or two shows after, kind of like peak BJ Whitmer popularity. It's kind of all downhill for him here, other than he does have some more good stuff with Jimmy Jacobs in the future. But Matt, you gave some thoughts. I don't know if
BJ Whitmer Apex Mountain BJ Whitmer to steal a gimmick from one of my other rigger colleagues. This Apex Mountain BJ Whitmer. Not this match wasn't, but this era was. I wrote up Whitmer Jacobs at one of their IWA Mid-South matches in Way of the Blade. I remember thinking was incredibly awesome. But they like an I Quit match that was just great in IWA Mid-South. So yeah, PJ Whitmer, yeah, like his highs are pretty high. Like if you put together like a list of the 15 best BJ Whitmer matches, you'd be like, holy shit, BJ Whitmer. But it's like once you get down to like if you did the 30 best matches, 20th through 30 are going to be pretty hard to find like great ones. And I think your average BJ Whitmer, high ceiling, low floor kind of BJ Whitmer is a wrestler.
And just to show how wonderful the timing of Trevor and I are, we did that review of the barbed wire match and really praised PJ a lot. And then like immediately after that, all those stories came out about, the accusations against Whitmer, and he got fired from AEW and stuff. So, we are really killing it with the timing on our.
It was the one show that we were like, like we're probably not as negative on BJ as you are, but like we're not like giant BJ boosters. And it was like the one show where we really gave him his flowers, and then immediately afterwards he gets canceled for some pretty horrendous accusations. So yeah. So Matt, I don't know if you have any more thoughts on the match. I would just say yeah, I agree with Phil in the sense like the brawl is the best part of this match. Like it's one of those ones where even though Ring of Honor has the two handheld ringside cameras, they never want to use both of them. So even though Pierce and Whitmer brawl off somewhere else, you never see that. You just see the Homicide Carino brawl. But to be fair, if you're only going to see one of those brawls, that's the one you want to see. And it's not the craziest brawl you ever seen, but I just like it because it gives you what you want from Homicide and Carino in that it has that sense of danger. Like you never knew how much these guys really didn't like each other. You always felt like I had the best of them, that they were like one wrong move away from like legitimately angering the other wrestler. And so here, when you see, a Homicide throw a chair at Carino's head, it feels like kind of reckless. When you see Carino throw a punch in the crowd, like to Homicide, it looks pretty snug. Like it allows you to kind of suspend that disbelief, and it's what I want. And then from these two, and then when it gets back into the ring, it's one of those weird matches where they have this wild brawl, and then they make their way back to the ring and go, well, we should just have a regular tag match for a while. And just when it starts to seem like maybe it could pick up, Homicide's getting in the ring, he's getting the hot tag, we get our storyline where the Briscoes run in and we get a non-finish, which I imagine I know Gabe's philosophy is like when you have a couple big matches up top that you hope will send fans home happy, you can kind of give them the non-finish or the more disliked, the more risky booking of something like this where you kind of get, just a schmoz out of it. But overall, yeah, Matt, I'm really sad because my memory is awful, but I think you're right that this is probably like we're going to see worse from Carino and Homicide than this, which is sad because I love that stuff so much. It's one of my biggest disappointments that it doesn't live up to the promise. And it's so weird because that first match they had, not the Bitter Friends, Stiffer Enemies one with Ever Love. It's actually, there was one earlier, that one in like the first New York show, I think like the first anniversary show. Yeah. That match between them isn't that great either. It's like they fall into this incredible chemistry, and then I think for the rest of their careers, like when you watch them, you see they have these little glimpses of it. They'll capture it once in a while, but they never put it all together again like they do in those two matches. Or I don't know what happens. It's just lightning in a bottle, I guess, for a little while between those two, and it doesn't always last forever. But the only other things I would say about the match are the crowd was still, like I said, pretty hot for this storyline, so it made the match, I think, feel a little bit less plotting than it got at times.
And you mentioned that they are willing to do a shitty finish here because they know they'll send the crowd home happy with the top two matches. Just goes to show how like Gabe was fairly confident that an ROH crowd would accept a time limit finish, whereas a lot of other, fan bases wouldn't. Because, I think for a lot of companies that would be the shitty finish, the time limit draw. But they knew ROH was educated to it, so they accepted that as a valid finish in a world title match if they got the full 60 minutes. So I think that's pretty smart.
Can I do the segue into our next match?
Sure.
Yeah.
So speaking of horrific domestic violence accusations, Davey Richards is coming into. Sorry, free to cut that.
This has been a rough few months. If you do a retro Ring of Honor podcast between Richards and Whitmer, yeah. I'll just say between the last match and this match, after the last match got thrown out, the Briscoes beat down. Homicide continues. Smokes tries to stop it. He's immediately taken out. The Briscoes Pillmanize Homicide's arm with a top rope leg drop from Jay Briscoe with a chair before they get run off by a chair wielding Smoke. So that we will get one more kind of. This storyline will continue later in the show, but then we get.
And then the only other thing that I'm going to say about that whole segment about the Carino promos at the beginning. First of all, besides the homophobia and the fat shaming and stuff that probably wouldn't fly nowadays. Fortunately, I think probably most promotions now on their shows, if they could, would edit out the stuff where Carino goes after an individual fan. I feel like at the time that was sort of except like it's just funny that Green Lantern fans immortalized on these DVDs so many times by having major wrestlers cut promos on him and his family. And the line where it says I'd ask his mom, but she's in the back having sex with all the boys. I kind of was like, that kind of just makes his mom sound really popular and cool. So
it's funny that Creel was trying so hard to be a heel, but yet like both nights of this double shot, he like goes into Green Lantern fan and immediately like that gets him like the big face reaction. Like there's no better way to get these crowds to like him than to go after Green Lantern fans. So like, but yeah, we get to the semi-main event, and one of the two big drawing matches of the show. We have Kenta defeating Davey Richards via pinfall in 19 minutes 26 seconds after hitting the go to sleeve. I have a feeling there's going to be some interesting thoughts about this match. Matt, they have a match like I think a year or two later that's remembered I think a lot more than this match, but this was the first. What'd you think about this?
I mean, like I said, there probably will be a lot of disagreement about this. I still like this match a lot. Like the early part of the match is, fairly like, hard kicks and, Davey is kind of holding his own and then just, Kenta would sort of get more of the advantage. And it really just, the story is just basically that the protege is, valiantly holding his own against the teacher. There's some, the crowd isn't on fire, but they're fairly attentive. We get one of those, Gabe cut-ins where Prazak has to say that the fans are policing themselves because there's a fan that starts to chant USA and then the other fans tell him to shut the fuck up. And I'm actually wondering if Prazak is so trained by this point in that line that Gabe doesn't even have to tell him to say that anymore. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think Gabe is always behind him telling him to say that, or do you think Prazak's like, I should say that now myself?
I mean, I think even if he has learned, I think he's only learned after Gabe slipped him a few pieces of paper.
Of course,
yeah. Say the police line.
But I thought that the final sequence with all of the, with all the near falls and stuff, I think that still holds up really well. Like the crowd was going crazy for that. And I thought the execution of all that was really good. I could see this match, kind of seeming a little bit, I don't know. I don't want to say soulless because I do think there was a story there and I think that there was emotion involved in the crowd. But I could see why somebody might not think this was the best Kenta match of the era or anything. But I thought that the final sequence was really, really top tier exciting. And I think helped tell the simple story. So I thought this ended up being a pretty great match. I'm still pretty high on it all these years later.
Phil, when I saw we were reviewing the show, this was one of those matches. I thought this will be interesting to get Phil's thoughts on because I know, like, I remember this era. Kenta and maybe for Davey Richards it was a little after this, but those were some pretty divisive people in certain corners where there were people that, I mean, they were very polarizing, that you loved those guys or you were really annoyed by them. And I mean, this is them kind of like, I would say both sides could probably take away plenty to support their arguments from this match. What do you think?
I feel bad, guys, because it feels like you're really setting me up to shit on this match. And I kind of liked it. I don't know. I kind of liked it. I was kind of like coming in expecting to shit. I'm not a Davey Richards guy. I think he sucks mostly. And he's been in some of the worst matches worst hyped matches I've ever seen. He was fine here. I mean, he worked kind of stiff. He had his really cool tope. I always thought he had a really cool tope. Didn't feel like this match got to the point where you wanted to like throw your computer out the window because they just did 5,000 near falls. Kenta was kind of stiff. I don't know. It's pretty good. I kind of liked it. I'm shocked. I feel bad because it feels like you guys were teeing me up to take a piss all over this match. That was pretty good. I imagine if I was live. How many matches did they have against each other?
Two in ROH. Definitely two in ROH.
Yeah. Again, the one that they have a couple years later is way more remembered.
Where was the other one?
Was that in Dallas?
Yeah, was that like a Mania weekend show in like 08?
Houston.
Yeah.
It was in 09, yeah.
Because I kind of thought I remembered seeing these guys wrestle each other live. That was maybe one of the reasons I thought I was at the show, but I don't think I was at the show. And maybe I was some other Davey Richards match I remember kind of liking, surprised that I liked live against somebody else. I don't know. It was pretty good. I really like his tope. And I thought it was stiff and kind of, served its purpose.
I'll just say, Phil, you have fucking betrayed me because I'm going to be the goddamn low vote on this match now because I thought we were going to get to team up on Matt, but instead I'm the one being teamed up on because this is one of those matches where I watched it. I realized this was exactly what I expected, and I also realized I kind of wanted something that was surprising me because both these guys are known for hard kicks. You want to see them throw hard kicks? They throw a ton of them. Both of them, they do. You like their signature shots? They do basically all of them in this match. And I think that's really all I got from this match. Like, I'm a guy that's known for making a lot of wrestling and food analogies. I don't know why I do that. I'd say this is a match for people who call cooking meal prep and the food protein. And when you ask them if a recipe is good, they just quote the number of calories, fat, grams, and carbs.
Do you know people like this, Trevor?
Yes, you
they
can
call
find
all
people all over
protein.
YouTube, Matt. Anyone that talks about this match to me is a slightly overcooked chicken breast with nothing on it. There's an account that Dave Meltzer retweets a lot that he loves for some reason, where it's just a guy who he breaks down matches by the stats. Like this match had 17 strikes and 5 near falls and 7 pin attempts, and he breaks down classic matches. This is a match that would play great on that, like the strikes and near fall counts and everything. But what I would say is these two guys are pretty divisive in circles. I'm capable of enjoying both quite a bit, but I realize watching such, I like them when they kind of add things on top of the stiffness of moves. Like I like Kenta when he's being a hilariously mean little prick to people and he's just being cocky and an asshole. I like Davey Richards when he plays this kind of goofball ass-showing jock, like we've seen a couple of his Ring of Honor performances already. The kind of guy who does the grr work rate stuff, but then he'll do a big comical stumble sell and flare flop, or he'll scream, "I got him," right when his opponent's behind him, ready to attack. Like I like that layer of something extra on top of that. To me, that's what kind of seasons the chicken breast, so to speak. To me, this is just there's no real story or emotion. It's just the move. Matt, I know you said there's like the story of the protege. To me, I felt like one of the things about this match is the whole story is supposed to be, it's the young Davey Richards, even though they're probably very close in age, being tested by his much higher ranking, mentor, the Japanese star Kenta. I feel like if you show this match to someone, apart from the finish, if you ask them like, who is one of these guys supposed to be way above the other and who, they wouldn't have a good answer. I feel like they worked this pretty damn back and forth even for a match that was supposed to be about, the protege's getting tested. There's enough action in this. It's all executed well. They're stiff, million kicks. It's good to me. But I wouldn't call this great. And I'm probably going to be, for a lot of people that watch this based on the review, be the low vote. But
are you? So would you say that the tag match with the Briscoes that we reviewed on the last show, you like that one better?
It's of the same level probably, but it's just, it's just one of those matches where I feel kind of hollow about it. There's something missing from it. But I will again say I'm the outlier. I thought I was going to have backup, but I've been betrayed. Because if I go to if you look at the live reports, I'll just go to the Observer. Dave wrote based on the live reports, these two kicked the hell out of each other, of course, and losing this match elevated Richards to star level for most reports.
It did feel like that in the building when it happened. It was like, well, he got really over with this match. I mean, the crowd was like really, really, really loving him by the end.
Yeah, and Dave writes, big ovation for both when it was over, and I heard everything I've heard 4.25 to 4.5 on this one. With the exception of the low-key match, it may have been Candace's best singles match in ROH. So, yeah, this for most people was the match of the night. I'm going to say I disagreed. We'll obviously get to why I disagree on the next match, but I accept I am probably going to be the low vote on this for most people. But
it's
I
funny,
do not hate this match.
Just 4.5 stars, but 4.5 stars is a real fucking pan in a Meltzer review now, right?
Oh yeah, oh my god, yeah.
Like that. The mid-card tag will get 4 3/4, and it'll be kind of like he'll say one sentence about it. So yeah, maybe. But I don't know. I guess I was expecting to really hate it, and kind of surprised how I didn't. So I think that might have been part. We may have about the same opinion on this match, but I was expecting it just to be completely bloated CrossFit wrestling. And I was like, this is relatively
it wasn't
briskly paced.
It wasn't even 20 minutes long, which I think helped it not get too bloated. But yeah, that happens with Trevor and I a lot, which is just like we will have similar views on a match, but I will feel more excited about mine than Trevor's, because Trevor would see a match on paper and be like, oh, this should be a really good match. And I'll be like, oh, I remember this show and I don't remember this match at all. So if I ended up liking it, that means that it exceeded my expectations. So I think expectations play a huge part, especially when you're doing these retro reviews.
I kept waiting for Davey Richards to drag this to hell. And the fact that he didn't, I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty good. I kept anticipating him to do some Davey Richards bullshit and make this match horrible. And it just kind of felt like it went through and never did that. And kind of a nice finish. Felt like it ended at the right time. And I was like, oh, this is pretty good. I normally hate Davey Richards matches and didn't hate this. So I guess it come off more positive than you might, than just, because it's like, okay. He's normally one of my least favorite wrestlers of all time. And this was pretty good and had a nice tope. And kicks look good, and at no point did he drag it into Davey Richards' hell, where it's like, I'm going to do 11 brain busters for a 2 count, and then the other guys can go right back on offense and do 11 brain busters of his own, and then we're going to stand off and stare at each other, and the crowd's going to clap. I mean, that was always what I was kind of expecting to keep happening, and never really got there. And I was like, oh, okay, this was okay. This is the last match. And it was like it felt like I was almost like coming into it like resenting you two for making me fucking watch this. It's like, oh, these fucking guys.
Again, I thought I was going to get that Phil, and yeah. I thought I was going to agree with him.
I think he becomes more self-indulgent though, when he becomes champion and has these 40-minute matches. That's when you really get that stuff. And then the funny thing is, that's when Meltzer started giving him the 5-star matches a lot, and
the Mike Elgin one that everyone points to, where. Yeah, that was the one where I feel like people really drew a line in the sand. But no, I think and Phil,
Meltzer's opinion wrestling are awful, guys. They're awful. So it's like, yes, he gives them 5 stars to this unwatchable garbage because his opinions are just terrible. They're the worst. He's Armand White, but if Armand White somehow was Roger Ebert, but whatever.
Well, that segues perfectly into this, because I've kind of set up a little thing before we get into the main event that kind of contrasts a few people. So we'll get into this. So the main event, of course, our final match, Ring of Honor World Title match. Bryan Danielson, Samoa Joe in the quote-unquote fight of the century, went to a 60-minute time limit draw. So before I've asked everyone for their thoughts, I did my research, and I feel like the quotes I got here from a few people tell a little story. So first we'll go to Wrestling Observer live reports. This is, Dave talking based on him not seeing the match, but live reports. He wrote, the show was headlined by Danielson keeping the ROH title, going to a 60-minute draw with Samoa Joe. Reports on this one varied. I heard everything from 2 3/4 stars to 4 1/4 stars. The match was slow early, but the crowd was going nuts for the last 10 minutes, and a lot of near falls, and the crowd was on its feet. The crowd did want 5 minutes more, and Danielson refused to accept it. There were people who were disappointed due to it being slow early on and didn't reach what what you'd expect from the fight of the century. Also, people figured they were going 60 pretty early on from how it was paced. Even people who loved Danielson versus Joe were saying Kenta's win over Richards in the semifinal was the battle of the night. Now, we'll go to some weird internet reviewer and a guy named Phil Schneider from the Death Valley Driver video review, who he wrote at the time, you can't really go wrong with the two best wrestlers in your promotion wrestling in a main event for a title. I really enjoyed this match. I haven't seen a ton of 2006 ROH, so this was my first chance to watch heel champion Bryan Danielson, and he was a blast. This was probably the best 60-minute draw Ring of Honor has run, but I do think these two have a better 25-minute match in them. Still, it had 3 separate "this is awesome" chants, so Meltzer really should drop the 5 on it. And then you have some more details, but I'll just move on to you talked about last 20 minutes or so where it's really spectacular. Joe's tope was as good as I have ever seen it. It was almost Pope Takeshi-ish, like someone someone dropped a couch out of a 4-story walk-up. This is why you read Death Valley Driver video reviews back in the day. Anyway,
God, I've used that out of the walk-up thing. I don't know how many times I've used that. What a chat GPT Phil Schneider line that fucking is.
But then we get to the moment, and this was rare at this time, because Dave only would watch like very select shows and matches from Ring of Honor in this era if they either really pushed it on him or he really wanted to see a specific match because he didn't obviously have the time. So Dave got the tape on this one, went out of his way to watch this match, and not Kenta or Davey Richards, mind you, either, just this. Dave would write, did he throw the 5? We'll see. Dave wrote, Danielson is a total pro wrestling artist as champion. There are inherent problems in a 60-minute match because you have to work a slower pace, and most guys work a lot better in 20 minutes than 60. Still, this was a 4.25-star match with the crowd going nuts for the last 10 minutes, and to me, it never dragged. The only boring chants were Danielson playing the crowd by calling himself the most boring wrestler in the world. Only then did he get the chance. But so I like comparing this, fans very divided, Phil into it, Dave pretty into it.
Can I also add the Bryan Danielson quote about this match?
Yes, I was going to say, Matt, this is what I was going to end with, but you can read it. I love the fact we've gone to this over and over again, that the biggest critic of Bryan Danielson is often Bryan Danielson. So Matt, if you've got the quote too, yeah, read this quote.
Yeah, I'm not going to read I'm going to cut this off because he's talked about matches that come later, but I'm going to read this paragraph. He says, in August of 2006, I had 3 one-hour matches within a 2-week period, 2 of them on back-to-back nights. It used to be that the NWA World Heavyweight Champion toured all over the world and worked with the top star in every territory. Sometimes he would win clean, but oftentimes, because the champion would be moving on, the local star would continue wrestling in the area, they would wrestle to a 60-minute draw. Lou Thesz did it. Harley Race did it. Ric Flair did it. I looked at it as my chance to do it. Unfortunately, wrestling fans don't have the patience they used to, and just as unfortunately, I am not as good as my predecessors at going 60 minutes. None of the hour-long matches were bad. They just weren't epic in the way you want it to be. The first one was against Samoa Joe in New Jersey, and I could not remember a single thing about it. End quote.
Yeah, so that is Bryan Danielson in a nutshell. Just
okay. You guys want to hear my Bryan Danielson quote? So again, we're deep into this podcast. So I'm working on another Way of the Blade book. I'm working on where it's going to be AEW specific. And one of the things I'm doing is interviews. It's going to have some oral history aspects to it. And I mentioned earlier, I have this Bryan Danielson thing for GQ, which may or may not run. But I additionally tagged on and got a bunch of quotes about some of his AEW matches, which are going to be in like the Way of the Blade AEW book. So this is his quote from talking to me about 60-minute matches. We were talking about the Iron Man match with MJF. And he goes, I've learned so much as I've gotten older. Some of the early hour matches I did, they were just like, oh, I can go an hour, let's go an hour. And without having a real idea in my head about the chapters of the story within the match, right? And so creating the context of an hour-long match, creating beats within that match where there's inflection points where something happens that becomes an important part of the story, and then something else happens and that becomes an important part of the story. So as far as storytelling beats, I wasn't even thinking of those things in 2006. There was 1 month in 2006 where I think I did 3 60-minute matches, and none of them were put together in an intelligent way.
Yeah, kind of matches what he said, back when he wrote this WWE book that I just quoted from. It's interesting because I get what he's saying, but I also don't think that people who watch these matches felt that they were wholly uninteresting either, you know?
No, but I was watching this, and part of it, I think, my rewatch of this now versus when I watched this in 2006 and wrote for the Death Valley Driver is colored a little bit by having this conversation with him, relatively recently about 60-minute matches, and I do not think this is even close to as good as the MJF match.
Yeah, or probably the first Hangman Page match. I mean, I think Trevor knows, like, I love that MJF match. Like, I just loved it like crazy. And I really like that first Hangman Page. I think the first Hangman Page match might have been my favorite AEW match of 2021. So I definitely think he got better at this. Like, it's interesting to see.
And and so part of me while watching this, like, it was kind of colored by that. I was thinking, yeah, this has got a lot of really cool shit in it. But you're right, this is not a match that builds to things from the beginning to the end. It isn't really. They just do a bunch of stuff, and it's cool stuff. And they have kind of a hot near run at the end set up, and there was nothing in the first 15 or 20 minutes that set up the last 15 or 20 minutes particularly, right? I mean, any individual 5 minutes of this match was really good, but he's right. He isn't crafting something from minute 1 to minute 60.
But I would be I'd be curious to know, like, because you guys definitely have watched more of this stuff than I have, and you could probably better speak to it. But like the 60-minute NWA title matches that he's kind of inspired by here, like where the NWA where Harley Race or Ric Flair or whatever would have the 60-minute draw on a night with the local babyface. Would they be crafting those matches to the degree that we're talking about now in the same way, or would they kind of just be doing like, all right, we're going to wrestle for this long, and then eventually the match is going to end on a hot series of moves,
Go ahead.
I was going to say one thing I think we've seen with Danielson in this era, like I talked about before, he's a guy, I think he literally at this period of time just had long matches because he saw it, one, as a challenge, and two, he just liked being in the ring, having a lot of ring time. So I think a lot of people, have long matches because they're trying to accomplish something or get noticed or some bragging rights. When he got the title of Danielson, they just started giving him like almost every title match was 30 minutes basically. And I feel like he just likes it. And I think the thing about Danielson, that you do see, and I think a lot of wrestlers have in the past did this, is I think there are a lot of matches you watch Danielson of this era, even though I think he's one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. I love his work, but there are a lot of matches of this era where you can see him, he's almost kind of just doing really fun stuff, but he's just dicking around for the first 5 or 10 minutes, and then he kind of finds something, and then he goes, oh, like, okay, that'll be the story of the match. Like, he's not coming, so like what Phil's saying about, stuff, busy work at first, like, it feels like a lot of his matches, I think, if you rewatch of this era, feel like Danielson kind of just playing around until he seizes on something that kind of catches his interest, and then he pushes the match in that direction. And to me, when you watch this match, the last 30 minutes feel like a match that kind of tells a story and is like, could have been a great match just on its own. And then the first 30 minutes do feel like a separate amount of busy work to fill that I think is really good, well done stuff, but it is almost like you could cut the first 30 minutes off and just have like a complete meal on the back half. And so, it does feel like we're dicking around, we're killing time, and then, okay, now I'm going to start working on your knee. Now we're going to tell the story. Now we're going to go into the bigger stuff. And I do think more of the earlier 60-minute matches are probably like that in wrestling, where it's guys just killing time until they find something that they can a thread they can pull on.
Yeah, and it's killing, but it's a lot more mat work and a lot more. I mean, it is slower paced, right, than this match, and I think that that is something that. But it's you want to watch Terry Funk dick around for 15, 20 minutes, right? It's going to lead to something big at the end. But I mean, I don't have a lot of patience for super long matches anymore. Like that was something, so this is, part of me is just like, for the most part, whereas I used to like really look in this era, you really look forward to trying to watch guys go this long. Now it's like, God, how long is this match? 28 minutes long? Jesus Christ, why is it 7 minutes long? And that's just kind of how that's how my tastes have changed. I have less tolerance for super long matches, even on rewatch. I mean, this is some cool shit in it. I was happy I watched it. But I don't I don't know if Joe and Danielson ever together had a really great match. There's been some good matches. But that was the ROH match. There's never if you're making a list of the greatest ROH matches that you guys have seen as you go through this, are these Joe Danielson matches? They're not up the super top tier.
Well,
I guess in my review, let me argue with 20 years ago Phil Schneider. These aren't as good as the Joe Punk matches.
Oh, so say this match definitely was not as good as the Joe Punk matches. Danielson.
Yeah, what am I talking about?
Danielson and Joe have a match in October of 2004, Joe defending the title. It's about 40 minutes, maybe a little bit less. And that match is considered by a lot of people to be a top tier, ROH title match. I don't think that Trevor and I had it quite at that level, but a lot of people do. That's one of the matches that people talk about. And their 2006 stuff, I was so hyped for this match going live because I was so into that 2004 match. And so I enjoyed this live. I was really excited by the ending. I thought it was a great match, but I never thought it lived up to that one. So that would be the one. That would be the one Joe versus Danielson match where it's okay, this one kind of lived up to people's imaginations.
Was the 2004 Philly?
Yeah, it was Philly.
Yeah, the Midnight Express reunion show.
Oh,
that was the main event.
I was at that show. For sure.
Yeah, if I had time, I could dig up you probably reviewed that, I bet, because I bet you guys did a road report or something.
I definitely at that one. I remember that was the one I remember the Midnight Express reunion stuff.
And Trevor, I'm remembering right. You didn't have it at that top tier level either, right?
If I remember when we wrapped up the year, and I don't think this is. I think we're pretty in consensus here. We consider that a great match that I think we would both agree to this day. That's easily the best match they ever had. But it was not. I think we would both rank the Punk Joe matches above that. Samoa Joe and Jay Briscoe in the cage above that. Even that crazy, Punk and Ace Steel tag brawl with the Prophecy above that. There was a bunch of stuff we liked more than it, but that was a really good year for Ring of Honor for the top end matches.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. I don't think it breaks a year end top 10 or a promotion top 50, even though these are arguably the two best wrestlers in ROH history. They just, for some reason, I don't think ever had that absolutely transcendent match against each other. I'd really like to see them have a match against each other now. I think that old Joe and old Danielson could do it in a way that young Joe and Danielson never did.
Well, Danielson was talking about it a little bit at that press conference, but obviously, we'll see if and when he comes back from the injury.
He name dropped Joe as one of the guys he would want to one of the 5 or 6 names he name dropped was Joe. I was wow, that's the one that kind of sticks out. But yeah, and going to this period of 2006, this was one of the better years in Ring of Honor history. But one of the disappointing things I think is that Joe Danielson, if someone told you going in, well, they did basically tell us that you're getting a Joe Danielson feud where they're wrestling each other a bunch of times because this is just the first of a few matches they're going to have, and you're getting another redo of the Homicide Carino feud, you'd be like, holy shit. And sadly, that's both of those missed the mark. And here, I would say this again. I think this match is low great. I don't think it. I agree with Phil. I think that's the perfect way to put that. It's not transcendent. It's certainly not. It does not live up to the fight of the century, the two best wrestlers in Ring of Honor history. You would hope for your expectations are the absolute ceiling, and it never reaches there. But that is the one thing that kind of makes this last third of the year kind of weird, where you got two things that look like absolute home runs. And they don't really get to, this might be the closest they get to a home run, actually. Am I crazy, Matt?
You mean in the other 2006 matches they have?
Yeah.
Those matches are really forgettable. This was by far the best match they had against each other in 06. I think that's pretty much consensus. I don't know of another match between them because they wrestle at least 2 more times in the year, and I don't think anyone says anything about those other 2 matches. They wrestle once in a cage even, and it's not that good. This is definitely the disappointment of the year, the Joe versus Danielson feud. But this match, I agree with you. It's low grade. It's I think it's in that 4 to quarter star range to me. And that's you'd want it to be in the 5-star range because these were the 2 top legends in ROH, and they promoted the match so much, and I think people were really loving Danielson's reign by this point. So it was definitely disappointing while still being a fairly great match, especially that last 10 minutes. The crowd was going nuts for that last 10 minutes. That's the part of the show where I could see myself because I'm standing on a chair because I'm kind of in the back and I'm just like getting so into those final near falls and the reversals and Joe getting on that choke at the end, which you posted the video of on Twitter.
That is one of the biggest pops. I had forgotten that pop in the final, and it's mentioned in Phil's review. I cut a little bit of it out for brevity, but like that pop in the final minute when, if this crowd, I think, knew the match was going long by the way they worked it. But if this crowd thought that there was no chance, I don't think this crowd thought there was no chance Joe could win, because in that final minute, when he puts on the choke, that is maybe a top 5 pop that we've heard so far, rewatching every goddamn show. They lose their goddamn minds. And even before the match starts, I posted a clip of that too. The crowd with the dueling chants, like it's a legit, like not doing it for fun, like mixed crowd where for moments the chants actually blend together because people are picking their sides. And it's a really special atmosphere at the start and at the very end. And that's one of the things that kind of made me wish they did do a 20 or 30 minute match, because obviously they have to kind of ramp down because it's a long match. They can't be at that level the whole time. But I thought if you just hit them hard and fast with like a real balls to the wall 20 minute match, this crowd probably would have been just ape shit the entire time. Like it would have been a special atmosphere.
You guys really watched Punk Joe. My always thought was that the one that wasn't 60 minutes was the best of them.
Yeah, that was definitely by far what Trevor thought. I still like that second 60-minute draw slightly better, but definitely when you're talking about matches that have, all that forethought and they plan out different points and like tell a really, really well thought out story, the third match reigns above all of them. It's the one where they really put the most effort into laying it out and calling things back and having that drama with the blood and stuff. So I think a lot of people in retrospect do think that third match is the best one.
I think more people remember the second just because of the length, but I feel like if you were like a fan at the time, there are so many, like you were saying, great callbacks in the third one. Like it really rewards if you're like a real geek for the promotion. It even pays off the goddamn Steamboat Punk feel. Like they do callbacks to that in the match. I mean, it's just, I really like the third one. Of course, Phil, you probably just prefer the third one because it's the one that has blood in it.
Order.
That's
the same reason I like the Wrestle War Steamboat Flair match the best out of their matches too.
Yeah, so
I appreciate you can go long, but let me see you go short.
No, I think there is definitely something to that. Like, like I said, I really love that that MJF Danielson 60-minute match. But yeah, I'd be curious to see them do a 20-minute match and see what they do with that too. As far as the Joe vs. Punk stuff, one thing I do want to just connect that to for this show. Do you remember, Trevor, that in Joe vs. Punk 2, there was one guy in the crowd that was like a very audible Samoa Joe fan that would just be like, "Come on, Joe, let's go, Joe." There was a guy like that in this match for Danielson who was just very, very audible that kept like yelling things for Danielson. Like, at the end, he'd be like, to Joe, "You had your chance, you couldn't get it done." There's another one where Danielson was selling his knee, and the Danielson fan was like, "That's all right. His knee don't work neither." Like I just thought it was a fun counterpart to the guy in the Joe Punk match.
Yeah, it was like a third commentator. That guy was talking a lot, but I would
Joe's run. Like, is Joe done pretty soon after this?
He's in ROH regularly until early 2007. He kind of has a farewell tour in like February of 2007, and then that's pretty much it for him, except for kind of special appearances for the next many years after that, because they start phasing out all the TNA contracted guys at that point.
Yeah, this is the phase of his career where he's kind of taking some, like, he's picking his spots now. He's not giving you the full Joe on every Ring of Honor show.
What was the last great Joe ROH match? Not counting the Jay Briscoe match for the title, like way later, which I actually rewatched when Jay Briscoe died and wrote up for the Ringer and thought was awesome. But let's not count that because that was obviously like 10 years after this. But what was like the last, like, okay, this was Joe, peak Joe at his great, because by now you're right. This is the end. This is past his prime.
as ROE, right? This is not Apex Mountain Joe.
I'd be curious to watch the Joe Morishima match again, which we're going to get up to. It's in early '07. That match was definitely the last one that got the really high reviews at the time. I remember maybe not liking it as much as a lot of people did. Like, I thought it was a good match, but not like transcendent, like you would say. But that was definitely the one that people talk about. As far as what we've watched, probably the last great Samoa Joe match, like singles match, like great one at this point, Trevor, was probably Joe and Kobashi, right? Like yeah.
I think it's tough. I would say that, but I think it's tough because I think a lot of Joe's best performances since then in this timeline have been like
the 100th show.
Like tag matches or three. Like, there are matches where he has flipped the switch and you can tell Joe's decided that night, I'm giving 100% Joe. Like, but the matches themselves, he's either been just one part of it or, like, for example, the Kenta Danielson Joe three-way. We talked about that match where it's kind of an entertaining mess because guys get hurt, and all, Kenta, that's the match where Kenta gets not legit knocked out, like right near the start of the match, and he's like rattled the whole thing. Like, that match is not a top tier great match, but Joe looks like every bit as great as he ever has in that match. Like, he's got his working shoes on. Or like you just said, the 6-man tag, the CZW match, 6-man tag of the 100 show. Joe is like clearly like motivated to like really give us all, and he looks great. But again, is that like a great Samoa Joe match? It's a great match that Samoa Joe just happens to be in, performing well. Yeah, those spotlight singles matches kind of vanish after Kobashi. Are you guys still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would just say, for the 60-minute match, this match, I would just go over. I would say one thing I would talk about this match is, this match to me was like one of those matches where you're like you're watching sleight of hand magic, and exactly how the trick is done, but you can appreciate. You're appreciating not the trick, but you're appreciating just how skilled they are at executing it. Because I thought this was a match where you can see all the little things they're doing to drag a match to 60, and it's very obvious. It's not one of those matches where you go, oh, that felt like it was 30. No, it feels like it was 60. It's not one of those matches where you go, oh, I didn't know they were going long early. No, early. But I think the choices they make are really smart. Like, at the start, I loved all the Danielson, the whole first 10 minutes of the match is just Joe kicking the hell out of Danielson and Danielson bailing to the outside over and over again. And it's such obvious, like, we gotta pad this match up, but it's done really well. And I could watch Joe kick the shit out of Danielson forever. And Danielson eventually, gets frustrated and has a tantrum on the outside. I like that. I like the mat work. And then they do that really smart thing that I've seen in other 60-minute matches where they basically like reset the match. So first half an hour of the match is like 10 minutes of stalling, bunch of mat work, and then slowly ramping up. We're starting to get big moves. Danielson pops out, the flying head, but you think, oh, this match is really kicking into high gear, but they got 30 minutes to go. And then that's only when they start focusing on Joe's knee, which was been a story for months that Joe's knee was hurt. And it's only then that they work the knee. And what that allows them to do is basically slow the match back down again, because now Danielson can go back to the mat for 10 minutes and work over the knee because now the knee's hurt.
And that chop block to the leg, that's exactly at the 30-minute mark. So obviously they at least plan that part. Like, we're going to, kind of focus in at 30 minutes.
Yeah, and that's why I said earlier, like, the final 30 minutes could stand on their own. That you do not need the first 30 minutes. I enjoyed the first 30 minutes, but yeah, that is complete fluff to pad this match out to the 60-minute draw. But I think those final 15, 20 minutes are, fantastic. And yeah, I am of the opinion that most 60-minute matches would be better if they were shorter. And I think this is no different, possibly. I think on this given night with what these guys were doing, I could have edited this match down to like a 40-minute that maybe would have been better than their August match, if still not an absolute classic, that 2004 match. But I enjoyed this for what it was. I enjoyed this quite a bit.
This was definitely better than Punk versus Daniels.
Yeah.
As a 60-minute match.
So anyway, let me just scroll down through a million notes I wrote here that I am now going to ignore. One thing I also want to mention. I was disappointed. Normally I like Dave Prazak's commentary, but I was disappointed when Danielson threw up the peace sign and did the Regal stretch, like an obvious little tribute to Regal, which he was not doing all the time here. And Dave Prazak on commentary just calls it a modified STF, and luckily MSL on commentary catches it. He brings it up. And then Prazak kind of redeemed himself later because I thought he did one really nice bit on commentary here where Joe goes for the muscle buster late, and on the pin, Danielson grabs the ropes, and Prazak actually goes out of his way to say, if you notice, because Joe's knee is still hurt, on the muscle buster, he normally like marches it right into the middle of the ring. And on this one, he only takes like 2 steps because his knee is still hurt, and that lets Danielson grab the ropes. And I thought that was like a really nice little thing to point out that really I think it's those little story touches that I really enjoy seeing. So that was nice. So
I remember really liking a spot where Danielson like cuffs Joe right in the eye. I thought that was really nasty.
And Joe had a real black eye at the end of the match too.
Yeah, like you see Joe immediately start to like play with like the mouse that's immediately forming. Like he's realizing, fuck, he just eye for a second. And there were a couple ugly spots in this match, a couple botches from guys that you normally don't expect.
Danielson had a real hard time doing leg holds on Joe. Like he kept doing them, but like they would, it's funny because Danielson got a figure 4 on Joe after Joe got a figure 4 on Danielson, and that Danielson fan was like, yours is better than his was to Danielson, but Joe's figure 4 was definitely better because Joe couldn't get his leg. I mean, Danielson could not get his leg over Joe's like heel or his ankle.
Yeah. So after the match, the crowd chants for 5 more minutes. Joe holds up 5 fingers, but a barely conscious Danielson rolls to the outside, grabs his title. He teases going 5 more minutes. He goes back inside the ring, even shakes Joe's hand, and then immediately leaves the ring. So very standard heel move, set up rematches. As Danielson goes back to the entrance, Kenta appears. He's staring at him at the entrance ramp. He's pointing at Danielson. Danielson begs off until the Briscoes attack Kenta, at which point Homicide runs in. He attacks the Briscoes to get revenge earlier. They march to the ring as Danielson and Kenta disappear. Joe starts to walk to the back, but he sees Homicide's brawling the ring with the Briscoes, and he proceeds to get back in the ring, quickly helps Homicide. He takes out the Briscoes. Joe grabs the mic and tells Homicide if anyone's going to kick Homicide's ass, it's going to be Joe. Joe says when ROH needed soldiers, Homicide soldiered. When they needed men, Homicide was the man. The only reason Joe just said Homicide's ass was that Homicide saved ROH's ass from those scumbags in Philly. Joe says Homicide hates him. He hates Homicide. He can't stand Homicide's ass. But Joe hears that because of bullshit politics, Homicide's down a soldier. He goes, well, from now on, you have one in me. Homicide snatches the mic away. He proposes that he and Joe take on the Briscoes in New York City. They shake hands, and Joe says in New York City, he'll be proud to welcome people to Ring of Homicide. And I thought this was a good angle. And again, I think you can see Gabe's booking here where the last time they ran a 60-minute match, they ran it was Christopher Daniels, CM Punk. And that match, I think people were pretty disappointed that it went to a 60-minute draw, and that was the end of the show. So here I feel like this is Gabe booking some insurance, being like, well, whether or not the fans are satisfied with the 60-minute draw, if we have Homicide and like Joe unite at the very end of the show, that's something, these guys have been feuding in the company basically since near the start. That'll be something that sends them home happy. And I think it's a good angle. Like the motivations make sense. They don't act like they absolutely love each other now. The idea that Joe's basically like paying Homicide back for how Homicide helped them out in the CZW feud, like it all works out. It all makes sense to me.
And it's also that local area booking because this is basically the NYC market, and the next, run of shows in that area are going to be the Glory by Honor, where they have the debut at the Manhattan Center. So they build up the Danielson versus Kenta match and also announce this new match that makes that card seem, pretty special at this point.
Yeah. So yeah, nice little booking.
I don't remember Joe, Homicide versus the Briscoes. Is that good?
I don't remember it being that good, but we'll find out pretty soon when we review it.
I know Bix really loves it, so we'll see if we can make fun of Bix in a good-natured way. But I think Bix might like. Didn't he say something like in the last year about like that was on the scale to be like the match of the night or something at one point? If not,
I think so. I don't remember it being at that level, but
we'll see. I mean, Lord knows I've had weird opinions on matches on the show. So we finally end the show with a shot of the ring set up for the UK shows. The next 2 shows, as a scrolling graphic tells us, the time has come for ROH in the UK. So that was the show. That was Fight of the Century. Phil, what do you think about like revisiting this all these years later? You sitting down to watch a poor guy having to sit down to rewatch 3 hours just to do a dang podcast. What do you think of revisiting a show from this far back?
I thought it was fun. I didn't think it was a show that had like anything that I revisited a bunch of ROH. The first thing I wrote for The Ringer was like when it looked like ROH was shutting down was kind of was like a best matches of ROH. So I watched a bunch of stuff I hadn't seen in a long time. I didn't think anything was on the level of the best stuff I watched. But it's kind of fun to check out a show from this period. I mean, clearly from my review in 2006, I had been stepped away a little from 2006 ROH. And so I didn't have as many like sense memories as I would have had if I had hooked up with you guys, for shows in 2005. But it was fun. There was some real moments where I was like, guys like Jack Evans and Jimmy Rave, where it's like I hadn't really thought about those guys in a while and really enjoyed watching them at their peak. Jimmy Rave didn't wrestle, but he was doing stuff. So yeah, it was fun. It was good. I was glad I did it. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think you
need a project in a lot of ways to go back for a reason to watch some of this stuff. I would need a project. This was a good project.
I mean, yeah, that's basically what Matt and I do, and basically it feels like 50% of middle-aged fans is if we just do projects so we have excuses to rewatch the wrestling we watched when we were younger. But Matt, what do you think about this?
I think that maybe the undercard was maybe mildly like less memorable than average. But still, this was such a solid era that everything was still, fine. And I really, really did like that Richards and Kenta match, probably the most of any of us. And so like that really boosted the show for me. And then I still really like the main event. It's like I said, not that top tier match, but still, two great wrestlers having a 60-minute match. So I think all in all, I think this was still a good show. Not the best show we've watched recently, but a good one.
Yeah, and I was thinking when I was thinking about my thoughts on the show, I was thinking of both things that Phil and you, Matt, said. I was thinking about like the context really influences how much you enjoy something. Like Phil was saying, how at different points he liked stuff more than he thought because hey, he's just dropping in and visiting guys he maybe hasn't seen in this era for a while, and like. What you want from a promotion when you watch every show, like in a short span of time or in our case, a medium span of time, I guess, is different than when you just drop in. Like there are matches, there are certain matches in life, like kinds of matches where if I see it like once a year, I'll love it. If I see it once a month, I'll probably like grow to get sick of it or hate it. And like I was thinking what you were saying, Matt, earlier about how like expectations, like I came away like the Joe Danielson match was better than I remembered it. So I was pretty happy about ending the show with that. And the Kenta Richards match, I'm hard on it probably because I remembered it being better than it was. So, my real thoughts if I rewatch these matches again, like 5 months from now might be different. But the show I saw in the time of my life I saw it, I thought it was a pretty good show. I agree that there was nothing here that's going to be like a match of the year list, but I think it's a very good 60-minute match. Well, we will see worse 60-minute matches, and we have seen worse 60-minute matches on this show. Yeah, and a decent undercard. So yeah, that was Fight of the Century. So now, Phil, we end with the point.
60-minute matches did ROH run after this? I'm trying to remember.
As Danielson said in the book, he is about. Next week they're going to in the timeline. They're doing the UK double shot. Then the week after they do back-to-back nights. He goes to a 60-minute draw with Nigel McGuinness, which he does not think highly. If you think he snubs this match, he really does not think highly of that match. And then the very next night he does the 60-minute with Colt Cabana, and that's the match where he blows out his shoulder like in the first couple minutes, and he just guts through it.
And then isn't there a 60-minute match like in maybe like 2015 or 2016 between Jay Lethal and Roderick Strong? Am I remembering that correctly?
And isn't there also one with like Aries and Tyler Black?
Yeah, I think so. And there might even be a tag team one at some point.
Yikes. Yeah. Good luck with Aries, Tyler Black in 3 years.
We're never going to make it to that.
If we ever get to that, geez.
But Phil, I plugged some stuff up top, but what do you? I mean, I thought I had sorted out your plugs, but I did not realize you were working. I thought last year I thought you were working on a Dustin Rhodes book, that you're working on an AEW book. You're possibly got something. You're working for GQ. I mean, Jesus, what do you have to plug, man? You've got
for GQ.
So much going.
GQ has not published anything I've written for them yet, so who knows? I have wrote. But I guess technically, I did have a thing for GQ, which may come out or may not come out, and the Ringer column is defunct, sadly. I'm doing that on Patreon, doing some stuff with so you can if you check my Twitter, I still put that column out every week, even though it's not on as big a platform on Patreon, but you can read it for free. And we're still working on a Dustin Rhodes book. That's that'll come out at some point. And then we're doing that AEW ROH, AEW Way of the Blade thing. AEW Way of the Blade thing, I'm hoping will come out, in the, fall. I'm pretty close to done with all the writing for that. And the art and the interviews I'm still lining up. I've got some interviews this week, hopefully with the Bunny and Britt Baker, to get some quotes from them. And and theoretically, I should, I'm not fired from the Ringer. They're just not paying anybody to write about wrestling right now. So maybe at some point they will pay me again to write about wrestling. So keep your eyes peeled. But if you can follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky, and I guess Threads, and I will have what I'm up to. That.
I was going to say, trust me, I relate to being in another realm with a wrestling website, not knowing if you're still employed with them or not. So if you want to get in contact with us at Through the Years, as always, throughtheyears@gmail.com, THROH for through, at Trevor Dame on Twitter, at Mayor MGF on Twitter. Next time on the show, we'll be covering one of the huge ones. That's Unified. That's the show with the Bryan Danielson, Nigel McGuinness title unification match. It's the first Ring of Honor show in the UK. It's the one with all the big concussion worries that sparked a bunch of discussions. And it's Bryan Danielson and Nigel McGuinness wrestling in the UK for a company's first show in the UK. I don't think we'll ever see that again.
Trevor's underselling how excited he is for this one.
Yeah, I am. I will be pumped. And again, we might have a guest for that one that I'm really pumped from, that might just have some opening thoughts. And it should be a fun time. And again, thank you so much, Phil, for doing the show. For people like, we talked about this with the Death Valley Driver stuff when Dean died, but a big reason people like me got into Ring of Honor and had any interest in finding out this world of US indie wrestling and foreign wrestling was because of the Death Valley Driver and Phil and Dean and everyone else there. So it was a real kick to have you on the show. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. I'll put a pin in a show of a later date, and I'll come back and do another show with you guys. I had fun doing this. It was, the idea of I'm rewatching an entire Ring of Honor show from some dated history. I got such a kick of that. It's just such a silly concept. So I dug it. I'll come back if you guys will have me.
Oh, absolutely. This was so much fun.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, some people would devote way too much of their 30s to doing this, but absolutely. So thank you everyone for listening. Until next time, have a good time. Have a great time.